Brain Training, Intelligence, Brain Games, Video Games, and IQ by Siri Gallows. Narrated by Casey Logan. Chapter 1. Can Brain Training Work for You? To more easily understand this concept, I need to mention the real answer is both yes and no. We all want to be smarter, though our reasons can be as individual as we are. Some of us worry about cognitive decline as we age. Others try to be brighter for our work. Some just want to be faster at solving those annoying Sudoku problems. Consumers have lots of choice for how to train up their brains. Luminosity, CogFit, and Elevate are just several programs offering to help you increase your brain at a modest cost, generally in the form of basic games for your mobile phone. All of us really love games, so the commitment appears small. But how much do we truly know about these programs? The science can be overwhelming, if a company even shares its scientific research at all. Though nobody can tell you what will work best for your own individual needs, there are 3 crucial things to know about brain training programs. The knowledge will not make you any smarter, but it will help you comprehend the concepts behind the games and why they at times work and at times do not. First, training has to be adaptive. Let's start with a simple analogy. Darts. If you want to be a better darts player, how would you begin? Hopefully, you would not stand 20 yards from a dartboard and start chucking. Instead, you'd most likely try a shot with a moderate level of success, perhaps some feet away, then advance or back up depending on how you do. Simply put, you would adjust. The same concept certainly applies to brain training. You definitely would not begin working on your memory by studying 50-item lists. The key is to begin basic, and after that, broaden, always at the limitation of your capabilities. With sports, as with cognitive training, we do best when we attempt what's just beyond our reach. This sounds easy enough, but it also means that easy training is useless training. Not only should you stay away from any brain training programs which aren't adaptive, but you should also keep away from games that don't severely challenge you. This continuous need for a challenge is also why there is so little scientific support for brain training, at the very least in the academic realm. Spending 20 hours memorizing lists won't enhance your brain unless the lists are the proper length, and that length is different for every individual. It might even differ every day, and that makes finding your training sweet spot very hard. Second, training must be varied. There's something amusing about memory. It's not a single thing. An example would be the following. There's verbal memory and visual memory, each exercising very different parts of the brain. Most good training programs involve a wealth of sensory experience, of sights and sounds to enhance these separate affective and memory systems. The really good ones will also tap different mathematics and verbal retention capabilities too, to name a few things. Intelligence does not just include a single ability, so training on one thing does not assure advantages anyplace else. Keep in mind that to see advantages in a broad sense, you will need to train up a ton of different abilities. This also has its advantages, because training on just a single task can get laborious. It also means, though, that getting real benefits will take a little while. Finally, training must be generalized. If there's one thing to remember when it pertains to your brain training programs, it's that you are not attempting to master the skills you're training on. In fact, most games are unlike anything you'd ever encounter in everyday life. The hope is that your practice generalizes to more real-world capabilities. And here lies the largest issue. Those skills don't always generalize. While some research has revealed modest enhancement in things like IQ following brain training, a lot more research studies have not. So many, in fact, that in 2014, over 70 scientists signed a declaration warning consumers from industrial brain training programs. Typically, these programs feel efficient because you get much better with time. However, that doesn't mean they're making you any smarter, only better at their particular game. This can also cause some misleading marketing. Any claim of 200% enhancement should immediately meet question. Enhancement on what? Many companies avoid this question by pointing out research on the brain's plasticity, a rather worthless term, which means our brains change. Clearly they do. A brain that never changes is a brick, not a brain. How else could a brain remember what you ate for breakfast? Even memory, every social interaction changes the brain, and this has never been questioned. The real question is whether those changes involve some international ability to solve issues, or something much narrower. Unless a program makes specific promises relating to how its training generalizes, you're best off staying far away. So, should you head out and register for Luminosity or CogFit or some other program promising to make you smarter? That choice is up to you. But I'd be wary of basic solutions. Brain training programs might make all of us smarter one day, or they could follow the path of the South Beach diet plan and Taibo. They were fun and easy too. In the meantime, a very good start could be to eat well, sleep enough, and exercise once in a while. It may not be exciting, but your brain will definitely thank you. For that, science is well decided. Chapter 2. Brain Training for ADHD. We've all heard the ads on television or radio. Use this app and get smarter. Improve your IQ. Boost your memory. Concentrate better. But do these products actually provide when taken a look at clinically? And if so, are they practical for ADHD? Well, let's look at a few of them and see if they offer anything for adults with ADHD. Luminosity and ADHD. You've almost certainly found out about Luminosity. The app appears to be marketed all over website, radio stations, television. But does it actually work? Luminosity is the most familiar brain training app, and it has been taken a look at the most in research and mainstream reviews. Two useful resources on it are a January 2014 Psychology Today post by Dr. Jordan Gaines Lewis that summarizes research on luminosity, and a February 2014 evaluation of luminosity by Lauren Friedman at Business Expert. Friedman's short article offers specifics about the program design as well as its strength and weak points. So, how about ADHD? The kinds of cognitive issues that typically show up in adult ADHD, enabling individual distinctions, include minimized processing speed, multitasking, also called working memory, sustained attention, impulse control, and selective attention. The capability to successfully concentrate on one thing while tuning out other diversions. Now, these seem like the sorts of issues that Luminosity can repair, right? Luminosity and CogMed research trends. Regardless of the fun graphics and engaging marketing, the research patterns on Luminosity so far have been, well, kind of meh. The articles above by Lewis and Friedman give the details if you're interested, but the big takeaway on Luminosity is the exact same as it was in the blog earlier for CogMed, a similar brain training kind of product. Both CogMed and Luminosity have problems with skill transfer to real life. That is, the skills developed by Luminosity or CogMed do not generally result in noticeable enhancements in daily attention to detail, real-life memory jobs, or smoother relationships. Some individual studies have been encouraging of Luminosity and CogMed, Though, as a group and a trend, the research studies suggest that CogMed and luminosity encounter comparable obstacles. For most people, they just don't generalize much past the immediate computer system workouts or skills being practiced. The gains in performance originated from practice on the computer screen system jobs, but do not cause differences in life. Luminosity or CogMed seem to reinforce skills like memory, attention, processing speed, multitasking, and so on. Many sorts of things grown-ups with ADHD fought with, as they happen on the computer products, but these efficiency gains don't regularly move past the computer system where people actually want them. Surprisingly, a new January 2015 study by Florida State University researchers found that individuals arbitrarily designated to play the video games tended to surpass those randomly designated to train on luminosity on jobs of problem solving, spatial abilities, and determination. It is too soon to tell if that's just a single study talking or an emergent trend that prefers video games over brain training on cognitive skill development. But for an item marketed to particularly enhance your intelligence, memory, attention, and so on, well, you understand. So my viewpoint about luminosity and CogMed is that they probably will not hurt you as long as you don't spend too much money on them. But the chances of sharpening your everyday memory considerably, increasing your attention span at work, or increasing 10 points on your IQ, those are very unlikely. The new Canadian kid on the block, NeuroTracker. A similar product developed in Canada has started to make its way into the USA. This one is called NeuroTracker. NeuroTracker's designers mention that it isn't a brain game, but rather a scientifically based training program. It was developed from a research lab in Montreal, and like other similar items, it concentrates on developing skills for cognitive functions like multitasking, working memory, visual and acoustic attention, sustained attention, and so forth. Its website has fancy science fiction-looking graphics and testimonials. Remarkably, NeuroTracker has been used more in sports training programs than have in other situations. Designers of NeuroTracker hope to deliver where Luminosity and CogMed have struggled, by frequently transferring qualified abilities into real advantages. But it's premature to tell if they've been successful. There are only a few studies on NeuroTracker, and nowhere near as many as those that we have looked at CogMed or Lumosity. Some of these are theory papers which don't actually supply information, proof, in support of the item. Actual information studies on NeuroTracker are still pretty rare. Moreover, the posts I was able to find about NeuroTracker have all been written or produced by a person connected with its development or connected to the company who owns NeuroTracker. That is not, in and of itself, a bad issue, particularly early on, but to be accepted as a truly clinically based product, it needs to be tested and deemed effective by other, indifferent scientists as well. So the word on NeuroTracker is, perhaps? Chapter 3. The Truth About Brain Training Games. In the last few years, brain fitness has become a vital component of a holistic health package, and to fill that need, several firms have been developing apps and software application designed to train your brain for health, wealth, and joy. One of these brain training companies was just recently found culpable by the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, for making bigger promises than it could keep. Lumosity of Lumos Labs had to pay the FTC a $2 million settlement for claiming that playing their brain training games enhances performance at work, school, and sports, delays cognitive decrease related to aging or dementia, and reverses cognitive deficits arising from brain injuries. While their advertising campaign was awash with such messages, unfortunately, there wasn't enough research to back their claims. If you are one of the 70 million Lumosity customers, you may feel cheated, But to comprehend better what's going on and why this is a big deal, you need to know a little more about what the cognitive training, the better term for brain training, is and what it aims to accomplish. Cognitive training is an interference used to boost an individual's cognitive functions. Cognitive functions describe patterns of brain activity associated with getting, processing, saving, and using information. Cognitive functions are the micro skills that facilitate success. They allow us to achieve objectives of all kinds, varying from survival all the way to self-actualization. Some examples of cognitive functions include attention, memory, visual perception, reading comprehension, and language production. The output of cognitive function can be impacted by many aspects, some of which are known and some unknown. Cognitive disabilities could be short-term or irreversible. Alcohol consumption, for example, could affect cognition for a quick amount of time. A concussion could influence cognition for up to some months, and a stroke could, in many cases, cause permanent deficits. Cognitive training is the purposeful activation of these cognitive functions in a systemized and controlled environment so as to enhance their capability. For instance, training in attention could involve deliberate concentration on one and only one stimulus for an extended amount of time, so as to increase the capability to focus and disregard interruptions. Training in reading, understanding, could include pre-planned reading of chosen written text of increased complexity repeatedly in order to boost grasp of written language. Cognitive training is used mainly in clinical and at times scholastic settings to enhance cognitive functions that appear compromised or they're lower than expected for a specific individual. Presently, the most common and objective way of measuring a person's cognitive function is by measuring performance on a behavioral job. That is the theory linked to that capability. An example would be the following. To gauge a person's attention span, the individual is asked to listen to and repeat a sequence of varieties of increasing size. There are two objectives to cognitive training. The primary goal is to improve a cognitive function per se. For example, the goal of cognitive training could be to decrease reaction time or to improve retention of information. The second objective of cognitive training is to enhance an individual's capability to apply their cognitive functions to meet the needs of life more successfully, to take their smarts out of their heads and into the real life, so to speak. This is a more environmentally valuable result, because the goal is no longer to simply have good attention for the purpose of it, but to put that better attention to good use in order to perform better at work, in school, or in any other activity that needs good attention. This second objective is the holy grail of cognitive brain training. Scoring high up on a test of attention is satisfying, but if it doesn't translate into being able to stay focused during a long lecture or during a dull conversation with your spouse, then the high score is useless. And that's what Lumosity could not demonstrate. There's no question that regular playing their brain training games will enhance a person's scores on those games in time, but Lumosity overreached by guaranteeing that good scores on the screen will lead to cognitive enhancement in life. Those promised results were more wishful thinking than they were validated by research. In all fairness, real-world outcomes like these are most difficult to show in research. That is why the language of academics sounds very different from the language of marketers. Academics tend to make small, tentative claims, restricted to the findings of one research study. Advertisers tend to integrate, theorize, and translate such findings more easily. Though we should not throw away the baby with the bathwater, Lumosity has consented to tone down their language and sound more modest. They are also putting forth good effort to produce more research to test the efficiency of their programs. Additionally, in the hands of a really good clinician, Lumosity could be a helpful tool. I have used it in my practice, and most likely will continue to use it in the future. Let me clarify that I have no monetary or other interest in Lumosity. I have been as vexed by their claims and as gratified with the FTC decision as everybody else. However, as a cognitive training expert, and I know precisely when, how, and with whom I use it, and that makes a huge difference in the outcomes of cognitive training. Chapter 4. The Right Game for Your IQ. Ever since my parents purchased me an Atari 2600 for my birthday, I have loved computer games. When the console version of Asteroids debuted, I was first in line. When word got around that Experience, one of the first open-ended Quest games, had secret rooms if you knew where to look, I skipped soccer practice to discover for myself. Granted, the quest only involved a square dot running from dragons that looked like ducks, but it still had me enthralled. Computer games are a lot different now, but my love is still there. Now the dragons actually seem like dragons, and quests include worlds nearly as complex as our own. I don't play often as I'd like because I'm in my 40s, and leisure time is unusual, but I still maintain the games, simply because they're an enjoyable distraction. They are also healthy for our brains, as revealed by a research study released this past November by scientists from the University of York. My favorite game at the moment is Overwatch, a popular online battle game in which teams of players interact to accomplish objectives, like recording a waypoint. There's a lot of strategy involved because success needs all the colleagues to collaborate. So it shouldn't be surprising that when Anthasios Kokinakis of the University of York had players of a similar game also take intelligence tests. He saw a strong relationship. Specifically, he had 56 experienced players finish a standardized test of fluid intelligence, together with their assessments of their working memory and game-playing performance. It ended up that those that played better in the computer game also had higher intelligence as well as improved spatial working memory. A lot more fascinating is that other games didn't show the exact same relationship. Simple first-person shooter games like Battlefield 3 do not have the same relationship to IQ, and also show a very different pattern with age. For basic shooting games, the younger you are, the better, because hand-eye coordination is essential. For method games, which depend more on IQ, the optimal age was much later, closer to 30. That is because with age comes experience. And in some cases, a much faster and more experienced brain is more crucial than a much faster hand. It would be easy to take findings like this and say, so what? Higher intelligence is linked to a lot of things, like better work environment, efficiency, and greater lifetime revenues. So why not computer games as well? Well, it's possible that computer games may actually make you smarter. In another study, researchers from Florida State University had individuals either perform brain training games on Lumosity, which claims to enhance cognitive efficiency, or break out of the PlayStation to play Website 2. That is a completely different game entirely. A puzzle-based technique game in which the player needs to navigate a complex, changing environment. And it turns out that the ones that trained on Lumosity improved on absolutely nothing at all, while the ones who played Website 2 showed improvements in problem-solving, in addition to spatial skills and persistence. Not only that, but other work has revealed that simply playing such games increases the gray matter in the brain as well, specifically in the frontal areas associated with intelligence. It even increases the white matter associated with greater cortical connectivity. So if you're thinking about taking up a new hobby, computer games might just be right for you. Just beware of what you select. If the game includes puzzles or complex technique, it is most likely a pretty good choice. If the game includes a lot of shooting and running, unless your brain is specifically young and quick, there's not much to be gained. If the game involves dragons that appear like ducks, well, it's most likely time to update the console. Most crucially, if you play Overwatch and are ever on a team with Darth Cuddle, be kind, because he is old and doing his best. It's about fun, but it's also about learning abilities. Video games can be helpful if they're controlled and if they're bound to time limits. Chapter 5: Video Games, School Success, and Your Kid. Does gaming mean lower grades? New research explores the question. Young people spend a lot of time playing computer games nowadays. Whether they're building new worlds on Minecraft, doing fight on Call of Duty, committing mayhem on Grand Theft Car, or roaming any other virtual worlds available to them, video games have changed the way most teenagers spend their free time. According to the most recent Nielsen 360 report, over 2/3 of the U.S. population aged 13 and higher now consider themselves players, and the saturation point has likely not even been reached yet. When it comes to the overall amount of time spent playing these games, current surveys suggest that children aged 12 to 15 spend up to 12.2 hours a week in 2017 alone, and this fact is higher in older teens. Even in younger children between the ages of 3 and 4, the time spent playing computer games can average 5.6 hours a week or more. Given the appeal of gameplay, it's barely surprising that parents and caretakers and instructors have been stressing over possible damaging effects and also the long-lasting impact that computer games might have on child development. While much of this concern has been focused on the unusually violent content of video games and whether it might result in greater hostility, other researchers have warned about possible health problems consisting of loss of sleep and minimized social functioning. But research looking at the effect of video games on school achievement has been more controversial. While some research studies suggest that intensive video gaming can have a negative impact on school accomplishment, other studies have revealed the specific opposite. Part of the issue with this sort of research is that most of the research studies performed have been cross-sectional, making it very hard to make assumptions about cause and effect. Simply put, do video games impact school efficiency, or are academic underachievers simply more likely to play computer games? Because of the typically conflicting findings of the various studies analyzing how gaming affects school performance, different hypotheses have been proposed. The time displacement hypothesis suggests that the time spent playing computer games means less time that could be spent on academic activities, such as studying and homework. For instance, youths who play video games routinely spend a third less time on homework than their counterparts who aren't gamers. Still, research comparing scholastic efficiency in students who own computer game consoles and the ones that do not have found extremely little difference in their school performance. The sleep displacement hypothesis suggests that heavy gamers get less sleep in general than non-gamers. Together with getting fewer hours of sleep overall, the quality of their sleep is often poorer also. Not only do heavy gamers go to sleep after non-gamers, but the physical and emotional arousal produced by intense gaming sessions can lower the amount of REM sleep they get and make them typically less alert and more prone to cognitive errors. Similar to the other displacement hypotheses, the attention deficit hypothesis suggests that extending gaming can cause attention deficits and increased impulsivity. By taking some of the time from activities that might help young people develop sustained attention skills, such as studying or homework, video games can have the opposite influence. There's actually some research to support the link between overall screen time, video gaming, TV watching, and computer use. And greater attention problems through the connection tends to be moderate. But not all researchers share this pessimism about gaming. Supporters of the cognitive improvement hypothesis explain that video games are typically highly complicated and can serve as training programs for different cognitive abilities. This would mean that regular video gaming can cause significant enhancements in attention capability, visual orientation, and overall memory. And yes, there are some research studies that seem to bear this out. Although these samples used in the research studies tend to be fairly small, they have found that routine gamers scored higher than non-gamers on tests of executive functioning, fluid intelligence, and working memory. For young children in particular, the enhancements appear even greater than for adult players. So, is video gaming handy or harmful? As far as scholastic success is concerned, for their own study, Nams and his co-authors examined survey reactions from 3,554 students, 56% women, across 3 measurement waves beginning in grade 9, wave 1, and continuing through grade 11, wave 2, and grade 13, wave 3. In the first wave, students were asked about the amount of time they spent playing A. Online role-playing games such as World of Warcraft, B. Games of ability or method, and C. Other computer system or computer games played on a normal school day. Throughout the first 2 waves, students were asked about their grades in mathematics and German. Trainees in grade 9 and 12 then completed achievement tests measuring their actual skills in these subjects. Grade 9 students also finished tests of reasoning ability to be used as a baseline estimate of general intelligence. All told, 70% of the students tested reported playing computer games at least sometimes, while 20% or more reported spending 2 hours a day video gaming, even on school nights. As expected, boys spent much more time video gaming than girls overall, and there were also considerable sex distinctions in competence scores. While boys tended to outscore girls on tests of math competence, girls were considerably better than boys for reading proficiency and improving grades in German. In looking at general influence of gaming on academics, Nams and his coworkers found clear evidence that extended video gaming on school nights was associated with poorer grades overall. Despite the fact that the relationship was modest, the results stayed consistent, even when taking sex distinctions into account. When taking a look at actual proficiencies, however, i.e., math and language capability, as gauged by accomplishment tests, there didn't seem to be any related to gaming behavior. What these results seem to indicate is that much of the hysteria over the scholastic impact of video gaming on school success is likely lost. While gaming does appear to have a negative influence on grades, the influence size, while substantial, is still fairly small. As the authors explained in discussing their findings, students playing 2 hours a day increase the chances of getting a lower grade in mathematics or language studies 2 years later by an aspect of 0.8 at best. Even in the most severe cases, in which gamers play up to 8 hours a day, the degree to which their grades drop over time differed only slightly, an aspect of 0.5. Though these results provide some support for the different displacement hypotheses, and none for the cognitive enhancement hypotheses, more research is still needed to look at other aspects, such as loss of sleep, decreased social contact, or any of the other possible explanations that have been proposed by researchers. Apart from this, it may be beneficial to look at different types of games to see if they impact youths in different ways. For instance, there are numerous games that have been specifically created to improve cognitive skills. Could they be more useful than action-oriented games regarding school success? In closing, this research study does suggest that issues about potential dangers of gaming are likely exaggerated, at the very least as far as scholastic achievement goes. Still, just like the long-fought debate over whether video games make kids violent, the question of whether computer games help or hurt children academically is barely likely to be settled anytime soon. Chapter 6. Intelligence. What is intelligence and how is it measured? Reading a plan, upside down, standing out at chess, and producing synonyms for brilliant might look like 3 different abilities, but each is thought to be the measurable indication of general intelligence, or G, a construct that includes problem-solving ability, spatial control, and language acquisition, and is reasonably stable across an individual's lifetime. IQ tests compare a person's performance on the test with the performance of other people of the same age, usually referred to as a normative sample. In kids, the scores show the difference between a child's mental and chronological age. IQ, or intelligence quotient, is the score most widely used to evaluate general intelligence, or G. As generally measures a range of skills from verbal to spatial, anyone from any walk of life can be highly smart, and scoring high up on one aspect of intelligence tends to correlate with high scores in other aspects. IQ is the most robust psychological quality gauged and strongly correlates with positive life results, which includes health and longevity, job performance, and adult salary. It's also neuroprotective in ways that are not completely comprehended. People with high IQs are at a benefit in dealing with terrible events. They are less likely to develop full-blown PTSD and more capable of overcoming it when they do, and might experience a slower decline in the course of an Alzheimer's disease. Can intelligence be enhanced? Some aspects of intelligence can be improved. Nevertheless, debate swallows up how to improve intelligence and how much intelligence can improve. First, one critical prerequisite for intellectual growth is rejecting the belief that intelligence is fixed. Second, the elements of intelligence that can be enhanced includes processing speed, problem-solving techniques, and memory enhancement. There's a much lower possibility of improving general IQ test efficiency or working memory capability, a major correlation of intelligence. The skills practiced in brain training apps aren't readily transferable to either IQ test efficiency or to solving unique ecological challenges, and because of this, haven't demonstrated an effect on IQ. Do different types of intelligence exist? Most psychologists view intelligence as one overall step consisting of a wide variety of abilities, typically calculated through IQ tests. In the early 1980s, however, Harvard researcher Howard Gardner proposed that there may be multiple types of intelligence that people have in differing amounts. These types, of which there are now 9, include visual spatial, logical mathematical, and interpersonal intelligence, to name a few. According to Gardner's theory, a person high in interpersonal intelligence would likely excel at cooperating within a group, while a person with high levels of logical mathematical intelligence would have a heightened capacity to understand numbers, patterns, and sensible reasoning. But though the principle has gotten steam with the wider public and is typically used in personality or employment tests, many intelligence researchers challenge the existence of different intelligences and have criticized Gardner's theory, requirements, and research designs. Chapter 7. Your IQ is not continuous. Typical knowledge asserts that your IQ is fixed. Naturally, the numerous multiple intelligences change with the personal life experiences and development, but we normally consider the basic IQ rating to be inherent and unchangeable. But even the standard IQ steps change throughout different life stages. Clearly, the IQ of young kids changes as they develop. Several studies even show that working memory training can raise the IQ of elementary school kids. More than one analyst claims that a rigorous PhD program can raise IQ in adults. More clear is the decline of IQ in those elderly who do not age well because of illness. A disregarded sector along the age spectrum is the teenage years. Now evidence shows that this age experiences IQ changes ranging from a decrease to an increase. A study of this problem shows that both verbal and nonverbal IQ scores in teenagers relate closely to the growth changes that happen in brain structure throughout the teenage years. Longitudinal brain imaging research studies in the exact same people reveal that either increases or decreases in IQ occur coincident with structural changes in cerebral gray matter that occurs in teens. The research study performed MRI scans and IQ tests on 33 normal teenagers in early teenage years and again in late teenage years. A large range of IQs were noted, 77 to 135 in the early group and 87 to 143 in the later group. For any given person, the change in IQ score changed from -20 to +23 for verbal IQ and -28 to +17 for nonverbal IQ. Correlation analysis exposed that increases in IQ were connected with increased in cortical thickness and volume for brain regions associated with verbal and movement functions. The implications are deep, particularly as they relate to the regional environments provided a teen. What happens throughout the teenage years apparently changes the brain structure and brain power. Most influences very likely damage the brain, like drug abuse or social stress, or poor education and intellectual stimulation. Alternatively, the data indicates that positive advantages to both brain structure and psychological ability can arise from a psychologically healthy environment and rich educational experience. The data suggests that all the emphasis on preschool and Head Start initiatives may lessen our attention to the key role played by middle school and early high school. This verifies what many of us have always believed, namely that our society tends to insufficiently nurture late bloomers. Maybe the early high achievers who fail to live up to their promise do so simply because we incorrectly presume they can manage without much help. Parents or caretakers, teachers, and education policy makers really need to take notice. Few books can change an individual's future. One of them could be my book, Better Grades, Less Effort, which clarifies the learning ideas and tricks that I used to end up being valedictorian when a high school instructor said my modest IQ did not justify the high grades I was making. Educators predicted I would have a hard time with college. Really. I went on to be a formality student in 3 universities, consisting of graduating early with a DVM degree and protecting a PhD in 2.5 years. My IQ documented that I wasn't so clever. I really believe that poor learning skills are what hold back most students from superior achievement. That book can change a person's life, as my own experiences with learning how to learn have changed my life. I believe it helped my brain development as well. As everything varies, we should not be surprised to find hereditary differences in what is frequently referred to as the IQ verbal and nonverbal intelligence, as suggested by a test. The IQ used to be seen as steady over somebody's lifespan. If you were lucky to have acquired good genes, you'd be considered set for life. Also because IQ appeared to correlate highest with monetary success. First off, the Harvard Grant research study found that our ability to give and receive love correlates even higher with success than our IQ. Second of all, intelligence isn't as stable as originally believed. It can increase or decrease throughout our lives. Before offering possible reasons for potential intra-individual changes, let me ask you this. Why did people wind up with such a large brain? Most likely, you replied something along the lines of intelligence supplying an advantage in the evolutionary process. Yet, while intelligence clearly was advantageous, it may not have been the reason for our ballooning brain. There's much supporting evidence, first come up with by Peter Wheeler in the late 1980s, that we are blessed with abundant nerve cells simply because Earth heated up. Organisms adjusted by standing up, which meant less sun rays hitting the body, including but not limited to the heat-sensitive brain. The blood flow to the pre-human brain changed because of the erect posture, which allowed the brain to end up being cooler yet. The change unleashed the development of a bigger cortex, which acted as a protecting layer. Simply put, we had additional brain cells just in case, like an extra tire in the trunk. If some of our valuable cells burnt up, the non-specialized additions could take over their jobs after some training period. The trainability of these cells and also our intelligence is just a great side effect. How humbling is that? With this information in mind, let me share with you 5 reasons why our intelligence is not as fixed as my German teachers actually believed when they recommended schools and careers to us impressionable children at the tender age of 9. Number 1. The brain is a dynamically moving organ, teeming with life. Each cell is an altering entity growing new connections, dendrites. The moment we learn something, the brain is not a rock, but a river constantly recreating itself. I don't think the parts of the brain associated with intelligence are the exception to what Buddhists have known for 2,500 years. Every little thing goes through change. Number 2, intelligence is not located in a certain area of the brain, but involves a multitude of regions. If one area changes due to training, trauma, endocrine fluctuations, aging processes, exercise, fatigue, meditation, or nutrition, our intelligence should also change. Many people who work out, for example, grow new neurons in the hippocampus, responsible for memory. Most people who practice meditation routinely increase the density of the neurons in the frontal lobe, responsible for concentration. People who watch a lot of TV lose 1 million nerve cells per second. Small exaggeration. Number 3. The notion of stable intelligence contradicts my personal experience. Cautious, anecdotal proof. I was a late bloomer. Math was a nightmare until I entered college, which is where I ultimately began to teach it. All languages were Greek to me, although my teachers liked my creativeness, my stories. Much to my distress, I only began to focus my mind on the little things in life, on letters, numbers, words, sentences, as an adult. Number 4. Increasingly more research studies validate my personal experience. I love it when that happens. According to 2011 study, 35% of 33 children's IQ changed considerably from childhood to teenage years, either favorably or negatively. Baltz and Baltz have long showed that one type of intelligence appears to increase with age, taken shape intelligence, knowledge, while other types reduce fluid intelligence, problem-solving capability. But even the latter type can be brought up again with training, according to researchers. And consider the precious observations by Malcolm Gladwell. Skills are actually only skills when we train our mind for them. Get roughly 10,000 hours of training, and you too might become an outlier. Number 5. A research study from 2012 finds that the more open-minded we are, ready to engage with something new, the more likely we are to increase our taken shape intelligence. These findings don't suggest that genes do not play a role in our intelligence. They play a big role, actually. They provide a base from which we need to work, whether we like it or not. Still strong supporters of a stable IQ don't study people, but look at the population. What definitely applies to the population might not apply to you. You can make yourself the exception by not really doing what most people do, which is resting on their laurels after graduation. This has been Brain Training, Intelligence, Brain Games, Video Games, and IQ by Siri Gallows. Narrated by Casey Logan. The end. Brain Training, Myths, Cognitive Functions, and Sex Differences by Siri Gallows. Narrated by Casey Logan. Chapter 1. Despite scientific evidence, the majority of people believe these myths. What exactly entitles someone to be called smart? Some people really believe that efficiency on IQ tests is the gold standard to determine intelligence. Others point out that versatility to the environment and understanding how to be effective within your culture is the criteria of intellectual prowess. The commonness between these two analytic intelligence views is well substantiated, finding that being clever is only partially associated to rational problem-solving and sound logical reasoning. As such, lots of people who define themselves as smart make poor and regrettable choices, usually simply because they port incorrect beliefs and count on false information. Beliefs are considered false when the views contrast with established scientific proof. Examples of generalized and prevalent incorrect beliefs Include the concept that suicides are more likely during the holiday season, that most women's moods get worse during their premenstrual cycles, PMS, and that changing among different types of alcohol causes more intoxication than drinking one alcohol type. Furman and Hughes, 2014. In spite of what you believe, each declaration above was shown incorrect with scientific data. People whose base choices on incorrect beliefs often incur adverse consequences, including monetary loss, poor health, and absence of mental wellness. Still, the effect of incorrect beliefs intensifies when baseless reasoning affects others, which is often the case for parents, educators, and company managers. Evaluating the many reasons clever people reject facts are too large and detailed to define here, but the reasons typically include the influence of culture and personal experience, failure or hesitation to analyze the proof, and the influence of herd mentality, where group acceptance supports validity. People are also resistant to surrendering incorrect beliefs when they perceive no engaging reason to change or when they struggle to understand the effects of embracing an incorrect belief. The University of Southern California researchers Sinatra and Jacobson, 2019, used the metaphor of zombie concepts to describe relentless myths that afflict the teaching and academic community in spite of contrary proof. Below, I recognize some of the popular myths that prevent organizational performance, thinking, and decision-making, focusing mostly on myths connected to human intelligence and inspiration. Number 1. Most people are unmotivated. Maybe the most ubiquitous myth in the domain of inspiration is the purported lack of inspiration in others. Hoffman, 2017, explained that when implying others lack motivation, we're making an ego-inflating valuation that benefits personal self-respect. The amotivational assessment allows us to examine the other individual as mentally inferior to our own goals. In reality, there is no such thing as being uninspired. Many people, and even zombies, are inspired by different things at different times, and inspirations change according to the context, social scenarios, and task at hand. Number 2. Willpower is limited. For many years, scientists were determined to self-discipline, like work out, had endurance limitations that impacted self-discipline. A great example is a reticent dieter who, after avoiding sweets for weeks, breaks down and consumes a box of donuts, probably when no one is looking. While there is proof to support the restrictions of self-control, goal determination, and resisting temptation in time, Moravin, 2012, recent findings suggest otherwise. Job et al., 2010, observed that throughout the completion of folding box issues found on IQ tests, participants who actually believed or were told that they had unrestricted self-discipline exceeded a contrast group of individuals who thought their ability reduced with time. To put it simply, regardless of psychological fatigue, our minds can be tricked into believing we have the power to endure. Number 3. Multitasking works. To the discouragement of many students, pilots, and chauffeurs who text, the ability to multitask without impacting performance is significantly overemphasized. Krausker and Novak, 2010, Lokopoulos et al., 2016. Research reveals that there is capability limits when taking part in cognitively demanding jobs. Basically, restricted working memory capability constrains our capability to perform several tasks at once. Kishner and Van Marenboer, 2013. This means that we can perform some automatic tasks at once, like brushing one's teeth and thinking about what we will wear to work, and we can rapidly change between more complex jobs like cooking and chewing at our kids. Though we can't and should not simultaneously try jobs that need precision and detail without expecting a decline in effectiveness. Number 4. Nurturing changes intelligence. We would all like to really believe that any genetically determined characteristic, like intelligence, can be customized based on tender, loving care. But the advantages of nurturing are limited. Supporting is necessary but not sufficient to promote the genetic evolution of skills and abilities. Despite ability type, 50 to 70% of your talent potential is based entirely on genes. Recent confluent findings, Kahn et al. 2013, Nesbitt et al. 2012, suggested that hereditary impacts on cognition are maximized in more advantageous socioeconomic contexts. Tucker-Drobe et al. 2013. When analyzing the genes-environment interaction carefully, we find that children who live in poverty are at a unique genetic disadvantage, even with the more supportive and nurturing caregivers. Number 5. IQ scores are culturally prejudiced. There are two types of capabilities gauged on most intelligence ratio tests. Fluid abilities account for elements of intelligence like problem-solving capability, logic, and pattern recognition. The need for these on-the-spot kind of abilities is constant across cultures, with only a few cross-cultural variations. Taken shape, intelligence is culturally specific information gotten through education or experience. What the majority of us describe as book knowledge, steps of crystallized intelligence and IQ tests are routinely adjusted for different societies and languages to control for fundamental predisposition of a culturally confirmed test. Hence, while some people really believe that IQ tests prefer particular nationalities and races, it is not the tests that are the concern, but the capability to gain access to resources that may boost general test performance. Number 6. Intelligence can be significantly improved. Some elements of intelligence can be enhanced. Nevertheless, debate engulfs how to improve intelligence and how much intelligence can evolve. Perhaps the most appropriate maxim is simply, because people can prevent limits on efficiency, does not always mean that performance was actually without limitations. Hambrick and Bourgoin, 2019. First, one critical prerequisite for intellectual growth is declining the belief that intelligence is repaired. Second, the aspects of intelligence that can be enhanced include processing speed, problem-solving strategies, and memory improvement. Cheng and Sakui, 2017. There is a much lower probability of improving overall IQ test performance or working memory capacity, a major correlate of intelligence. Also beware of marketing claims from brain training apps. The skills practiced in the applications aren't easily transferable to either IQ test efficiency or to solve special environmental obstacles. Bainbridge and Meyer, 2018. Number 7. Positive thinking treats illness. Few of us would dispute the health problem breeds anxiety and stress. In some cases, the psychological rumination about the future can supersede the symptoms and effects of the illness. Even so, many individuals swear that optimism is positively related to avoiding disease, as well as an effective technique to conquer illness. While some research is unclear, a recent aggregate of experimental studies, meta-analysis, revealed that people identified with depression are not at risk of developing cancer. An et al., 2016. Most research studies that indicate optimism is related to illness, resilience, and quicker recovery usually struggle to show the influence of having quality health care available. It is rather possible that when one has restricted care options, that other elements besides psychological disposition account for healing perspectives. Number 8. We properly judge our own capabilities. Known as miscalibration, human beings are notoriously bad at estimating job challenges commensurate with actual ability. We think we can accomplish things better and faster than we do, and regularly believe that good luck will always be on our side. The overestimation of ability adds to often inaccurate perceptions, such as we will not get caught in traffic driving to the airport. We're more smart than others, and we can master a new language with minimal effort. Zell and Krizan, 2014. Remarkably, the Dunning-Kruger impact suggests that the less skill we have, the more we overstate our abilities. The reverse also holds true, as those are who perceived as specialists by social standards of wealth, proficiency, and experience tend to underestimate their abilities and prepare for success regardless of their shown capability. Chapter 2. Why you might not know yourself as well as you believe. You've most likely discovered that people who never tell good jokes somehow really believe they're funny. Bad chauffeurs, in a similar way, also think they are much safer behind the wheel than most other people on the road. Consider that for a minute, and you'll realize it isn't a paradox to recognize someone's own failings. The reasoning goes, one must have the abilities and judgment that would have been needed to avoid those failings in the first place. This is the so-called Dunning-Kruger effect, was initially identified at Cornell University by social psychology professor David Dunning and his college student at the time, Justin Kruger. Kruger and Dunning, 1999. After checking the impact of using humor, grammar, and logical thinking, Dunning and Kruger reported that those with limited knowledge in a domain suffer a dual burden. Not only do they reach incorrect conclusions and make regrettable mistakes, but their incompetence robs them of the ability to realize it. The influence is comprehensive. Subsequent research studies have determined comparable impacts in a range of domains, such as chess playing, performance on college tests, driving, monetary knowledge, and even the safe handling of guns. David Dunning himself has generalized commonly about the idea, expressing his certainty that inadequately notified individuals are more likely to feel confident in all their viewpoints, simply because they lack the information that would trigger them to question this unearned self-confidence. Additionally, in Pacific Requirement publication, Dunning believed that the issue of unrecognized ignorance is a thing which affects all people, not just the ones who may be viewed as inept. The impact Dunning popularized, and the principle of unacknowledged lack of knowledge, is significant in ways in which he may never have meant. Considerably, it is straight applicable to psychotherapy. Dunning says in Pacific Requirement that each of us possess certain fundamental beliefs, narratives about the self, that basically can't be breached. To oppose them would bring into question our extreme self-worth. All people, Dunning believes, have self-focused beliefs, which they are absolutely certain of, and from which they cannot be deterred. In part, this describes the trouble of assimilating new information that might oppose one's pre-existing worldview. According to the principle of cognitive dissonance, contradictory information about the self may be misshaped, overlooked, or otherwise resisted, instead of absorbed. However, it also calls to mind the Dunning-Kruger influence, in that many people, fundamental beliefs, go unexamined simply because people lack the perspective from which to assess them relatively. Thus, something like the Dunning-Kruger influence may come into play when psychotherapy challenges people to accept a new analysis for their own conduct. Any reliable form of therapy is at least a little bit confrontational, in that it encourages clients to stand back and assess themselves in hopes of developing improved self-awareness on the way to insight. Treatment seen in this light is the process of educating people about themselves, of helping them develop enough competence and self-awareness to assess their own foundational beliefs. It's entirely too simple to believe that you, above everybody else, are a specialist in the operations of your own mind. After all, there is no other person with whom you're better acquainted, no practice you have practiced for longer than that of just being yourself. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being confident, but at the same time, it's often too simple to see oneself in rigid, self-justifying ways that preclude insight and inhibit development. We may describe such a stiff perspective as a false objectivity, a positive but misconception in clear and overall self-understanding. Consider, for example, an older parent whose children usually tell him that his casual insults are upsetting, but who stubbornly views himself as humorous, the irrepressible kidder. Or imagine a young adult whose friendships are consistently interfered with by vicious arguments, but sees each of these arguments as the fault of the other person involved. To put it simply, try asking yourself if you have often heard the exact same criticism from others in your life, but have never wanted to acknowledge it. Finding out to put aside the time-honored story you've been telling yourself and picking the question of your own certainty can strongly promote mental growth. In some ways, treatment itself is the process of learning to see your own idea processes as subjective and irrational, influenced by both conscious and unconscious emotion. If you can acknowledge your own subjectivity in this way, you will more easily endure new possibilities, ideas, insights, or new narratives with which you can reframe your personal history. To put it more directly, try the following. Anytime you're 100% certain that you know something, don't forget to acknowledge to yourself that there may be a small part of it that you do not understand. When I published a podcast episode on imposter syndrome on social networks, a follower raised a very good question. What's the name for the opposite behavior of imposter syndrome? When someone thinks they know more than they actually do. There is truly a name for it. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive predisposition named for the two authors of a journal article describing how people overestimate their skills or cognitive capabilities and don't realize their mistakes. The problem isn't just that people make poor choices from incorrect conclusions. It is that they are unable to recognize their mistakes. Elements of the Dunning-Kruger effect. To understand the Dunning-Kruger effect, let's break it down into parts. Lack of knowledge. In the Dunning-Kruger effect, the less a person knows about a subject, the more they are likely to have strong opinions about the topic. It means that in case you are arguing a point with a person that has beliefs that aren't rooted in facts, that individual will stick to their viewpoint, even when presented with evidence to the contrary. That individual will also neglect skilled opinions. The person may tell you that the professional viewpoint is fake. The professional was paid off to hand the opinion out, or he or she might just discuss with you so that you can't get your facts heard. Since you cannot prove that something didn't happen, you leave frustrated, while the other individual is more entrenched in his or her own beliefs. False information recommendation. Dunning-Kruger means that people will back incorrect information if it fits their viewpoint. False information recommendation means that a person doesn't do their work in investigating sources to see if they're lawful. It also means that independent research is not done, so beliefs are not challenged by other information. Reinforcement by social groups. If you are surrounded by others that have the same beliefs as you are more likely to stay in those views. A neighborhood's viewpoints can become social standards. At the root of much of human conduct is the desire to belong. Going against the primary view of one group's threatens ostracization. They think they know more than experts. In a research study by Mata, Callaghan, and Sylvester, 2018, it was found that 1/3 of the study subjects thought they referred to as much or more than medical professionals and scientists about the causes of autism. That rate was greatest in people that had low levels of knowledge about autism and high levels of misinformation recommendation. Additionally, scientists found that low knowledge and high false information was associated with opposition to necessary vaccine policies. Moreover, they were more likely to support non-experts than specialists on matters of policy. Cautions of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Arguing with people experiencing the Dunning-Kruger effect hardly ever works. You are not immune to the Dunning-Kruger effect, even if you think you are very well read and impartial. Challenging them just enhances their beliefs. When you offer evidence that an individual's belief is incorrect, a person experiencing the Dunning-Kruger effect will end up being more established in their beliefs, and even more so if the opposing individual's argument is mentally charged. Nyan, Reifler, Ritchie, and Freed, 2014. Anyone is susceptible. If you think you're unsusceptible to the Dunning-Kruger effect, no. Being prone to the Dunning-Kruger effect has little to do with intelligence quotient or morals. Anybody is susceptible to this cognitive bias, and just because you are in a particular profession doesn't actually mean that you follow the counsel of a fellow expert. Physicians were only slightly more likely to follow a medication program than non-physicians. Frakes, Kruber, and Jenna, 2019. How to conquer it. Information from experts doesn't appear to make a dent in established beliefs. Neither does providing empirical evidence in a rational way, and presenting evidence in a way that sends out a message that you cannot believe a person does not actually believe facts absolutely does not help. So what does work when somebody is unable to admit that they lack information or are inaccurate? Learn why somebody actually believes something. Meet a person where they are at. It is not so much about the data as to how it is existing. A great example of this can be found in Buster Benson's book, Why Are We Yelling? The Art of Productive Dispute. Mr. Benson gathered a group of people that had numerous viewpoints on gun control. By the end of the night, everybody had expressed their viewpoints, and they all left on friendly terms. How did Benson do it? First, he provided food to the group. Never, ever underestimate the power of food to bring a group together. He then asked each person in the group to share their personal history with guns and how it formed their current opinion. Note how powerful it is to ask each person to share their personal experience. That can be a powerful springboard to having significant discussions. Again, meet people where they are at. He then asked everybody, how will we know when we've fixed the problem with guns? Through the phrasing of the question, Benson made it known he wasn't making judgment, and he also helped the group work towards a typical objective. There are some people with such strongly entrenched opinions that no matter what information you present, they will not change their minds. However, a bulk of people are willing to have a conversation about issues. It's all about how these problems exist. A common theme of respect dominates in efficient conversations, and if you don't change a person's mind, it is time to move on. Chapter 3. What are cognitive functions? Cognitive functions are memory, speed, reasoning, language abilities, and other things. In psychological health research, a person's capability to think, otherwise known as their cognitive functions, is an essential topic of research. The cognitive functions are a variety of different but related skills involving learning and problem solving. Together, these are some of the most essential and excellent abilities that the brain is capable of. The cognitive functions are jointly known by some different names. Different scientists with different knowledge call them general cognitive function, cognitive capability, and intelligence. This is the exact same intelligence of the intelligence quotients, better referred to as IQ. Top IQ tests gauge the same thing as what health psychologists may call general cognitive function. Because standardized IQ tests are typically given in school, they have been repurposed by health researchers to gauge a person's pre-morbid cognitive function. To put simply, if you measure cognitive function early in life before major illness develops that might impact cognitive function, you can make stronger claims about whether these health problems anticipate cognitive dysfunction. This work belongs to a subfield called cognitive public health. The individual cognitive functions themselves are numerous and varied. Many make more intuitive sense than general cognitive function, which is unclear. The memory domain represents your capabilities to recall things. The speed domain represents how quickly you can think. Others aren't as instinctive. Thinking represents your ability to solve new problems, especially with nonverbal information. A verbal fluency represents your ability to work with verbal information. Visual spatial capability represents your efficiency in interacting with physical items in the world. People rely heavily on our sense of sight, but we are also unique in how good we are at manipulating our physical environments and how doing things like making tools. Thus, people have developed noticeably stronger visual spatial capabilities. The individual cognitive functions themselves are not perfectly unique, though. For instance, memory can be subdivided into episodic memory, which evaluates your ability to recall specifics like products in a list or events from a story, and working memory, which is your ability to, at the same time, keep information in mind, like when you try to remember a telephone number. Though all cognitive abilities have the tendency to be correlated, that is in case you are proficient at just one thing, you have the tendency to be good at all the others. These memory abilities tend to be more highly associated to each besides to the other cognitive abilities, i.e., speed. We are starting to learn how the individual functions are important for health, too. For example, take memory again. All of these abilities tend to decline as you age. If you are healthy, the decline is sluggish. In certain cases, the decrease is much faster, though. In people with Alzheimer's illness, for example, the memory domain in particular decreases more rapidly than we would expect. You can observe these decreases in memory before you can categorize a person as having dementia. Preferably, we can find more ways to use tests of cognitive function to reliably determine mental illness earlier than we would otherwise. When used appropriately, tests of cognitive functions are an effective healthcare tool with wide applications. When does the brain start aging? How usually do you forget why you walked into a room or have difficulty recalling a word you want to say? Many people start to notice a boost in such brain blips in their 50s and beyond. Fortunately, most brain blips are common and are not a sign of a more concerning memory issue. The silver lining of brain blips is they typically increase consciousness of cognitive functioning and enhance motivation to participate in brain-healthy habits. Yet growing research suggests we shouldn't wait on brain blips or other cognitive concerns to take place before we begin to focus on brain-healthy activities. Truth be told, though, the majority of research on brain health has been carried out on adults who are middle-aged and older. Interesting new research shows that even midlife brain health can be improved by taking part in specific activities in their 20s and 30s. Decades before, brain health is of concern for anyone. This might relate to the finding for most people cognitive skills actually begin to decline at more youthful ages than expected. For instance, on neuropsychological tests, which allow for the precise measurement and tracking of cognitive capabilities or thinking abilities, most people already show decreases in spatial visualization and spatial thinking by their 20s. Declines in memories and reasoning exist by early 30s, and declines in speed of information processing are obvious by mid-30s. Even though these decreases are at first subtle, they accumulate with each passing decade and typically become more obvious after age 50, around the time brain blips start to end up being more evident. Interestingly, the rate of brain aging in the 20s and the 30s relates to the rate of aging in other physical systems. In an innovative research study that analyzed the rate of aging in young adults ages 26 to 38, the ones that aged at a more quick rate across several physical organs and systems, lungs, heart, oral system, kidney, liver, and immune system, as compared to their chronologically predicted rate of aging, showed greater cognitive decrease in the brain aging even before the age of 38. They also reported worse health and were judged to look older than those who with a slower rate of aging. What types of activities have been shown to impact brain health and cognitive functioning in midlife? A series of innovative research studies followed over 3,000 young adults, ages 18 to 30, for 25 years to figure it out. Some important insights emerged. Number 1. A cognitively challenging occupation improves future brain health. More youthful grown-ups ranked their occupational intricacy on the following products using a scale from 0 to 7, with higher scores suggesting greater occupational cognitive intricacy. Judging the qualities of things, people, and services. Examining information against requirements. Processing information. examining information on data, making decisions and solving problems, thinking creatively, upgrading and using job-relevant knowledge, developing objectives and strategies, scheduling work and activities, organizing, planning, and focusing. Those with the highest levels of work-related cognitive activity had much faster information processing speed, better psychological flexibility, and a much healthier brain structure 25 years later. Because this research is correlational and does not allow us to conclude that a more cognitively demanding job triggered better brain health, for instance, it's possible that more youthful grown-ups with stronger brain functioning to begin with just chose more cognitively demanding professions. Other research has suggested that cognitively intricate activities promote better brain health for people across a range of intellectual levels. The brain-boosting impact of cognitively intricate activities very likely connects to the concept of cognitive reserve, which explains that brain-healthy activities can strengthen future brain functioning in the framework of regular age-related changes, and even in the presence of diseases such as Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. Number 2. What benefits the heart benefits the brain. More youthful grown-ups with more powerful cardiovascular health and higher rates of exercise in their 20s and 30s had significantly more powerful cognitive functioning 25 years later than those who didn't. Engaging in physical activity that brings you delight is a great way to increase the probability that it will become a long-lasting habit that enhances not just brain health, but also bodily health, state of mind, sleep, and quality of life. Number 3. Lower levels of television viewing are linked to more powerful future cognitive performance. Adults in their 20s and 30s who watched television for more than 3 hours per day had considerably lower information processing speed and mental versatility 25 years later than the ones who watched less than 3 hours a day. Moreover, those that watched high levels of television and had low levels of physical activity were twice as likely to have lower cognitive functioning 25 years later compared with the ones who watched low levels of television and had high physical activity. All 3 of these elements had been formally revealed to impact brain health for middle-aged and older adults. And although it was presumed that these findings may also really apply to more youthful grown-ups, it hadn't been demonstrated until just recently. Those findings also dovetail with a growing focus in Alzheimer's research on the value of brain protective habits in the pre-symptomatic period, those decades before there are any cognitive concerns or signs of Alzheimer's. This is specifically important considered that the earliest Alzheimer's-related cellular irregularities are present more than 30 years right before diagnosis. And though we know that lifestyle aspects are only one substantial contributor to Alzheimer's, they're the only aspect we have direct control over. In fact, a healthy lifestyle can significantly postpone the expression of Alzheimer's signs, in some cases by more than 10 years. There is also growing research that developing brain-healthy habits in childhood makes it more likely that those practices will be continued and built upon throughout all phases of adulthood. For now, what the research explains is that whether you are in your 20s, 100s, or in between, it is possible to significantly boost your future brain health and decrease the risk of Alzheimer's, whether or not you have present cognitive concerns. By focusing on brain health as a lifelong pursuit, we end up being empowered and empower others to develop the best future for ourselves and our future generations. Chapter 4. Are men's and women's brains the exact same? There is little doubt that males and female brains aren't exactly the same, but is that handy in making choices about people? Not usually, simply because all brains are different and no 2 brains are precisely alike, as far as science knows. There are a staggering number of connections and chemical interactions in the brain. It's made up of 100 million cells and a quadrillion synaptic connections, a message connecting one part of the brain with another part of the brain. However, even more limiting is the fact that the brain is trying to study itself and all of us. Scientists and non-scientists have predispositions that have developed out of our experiences. Those experiences affect how we analyze clinical findings. If we ask the casual observer on the street, we find that many people believe that genders differ in their behavior and feelings, and naturally these differences go back to the brain. Stand-up comedians really love the humor associated with explaining these distinctions. Some joke that men compartmentalize their thoughts and have one box for each topic, like spouse, children, vehicle, and sex. And packages must never ever touch each other. Another much spoken about difference is navigation. People have observed that most men do not ask for directions when women do, and that women navigate by depending on maps or local signposts, like take a right at McDonald's, while men declare they have big maps in their heads. One well-known clarification for these supposed brain differences is the division of labor experienced by our hunter-gatherer ancestors. Men needed to vary widely so as to trap and kill animals, and would go through the shrub triangulating their position relative to fast-moving prey. They also had to respond rapidly, maybe impulsively, to resist attack. This may explain why more males experience attention deficit disorder. Women, on the other hand, cultivated food and learned to verbally communicate with others, to fend off male hostility, sexual and otherwise. However, those supporting the equality of male and female brains are suspicious of these historical reports, or really believe they're not appropriate today. After all, sound judgment told us the Earth was flat, and the sun rotated around our Earth. If there are real differences, they should appear in studies of animals. And they do. This is not the place to take a look at individual studies, but Robert Sapolsky has done us a favor by examining some of the research. I refer the reader to pages 213 to 220 of Sapolsky's book, Behave. Here's a quick review. In guinea pigs, male aggression is because of prenatal masculization of the brain. Aside from that, male primates are more aggressive than female primates, while female primates are more afflictive and more involved in social grooming and connecting with infants. Male adult rhesus monkeys are far more thinking and having fun with masculine human toys, meaning wheeled toys, than feminine ones, meaning stuffed animals, and women slightly prefer womanly toys. Obviously, hormonal differences influence the brain. Males are more rough and tumble, even when testosterone levels are repressed at birth. When pregnant monkeys are treated with testosterone, their female progeny are more rough and tumble and aggressive than those not dealt with. Sapolsky's reporting shows that it is also possible to look at human beings because of CAH, which is genetic adrenal hyperplasia, a condition where the adrenal glands produce testosterone. CAH girls are more rough and tumble, have fun with masculine toys, and show less inflammation. CAH males are more aggressive, have better math scores, and are more assertive. They also suffer from a greater percentage of attention deficit disorder and autism. An inverse of CAH is AIS, androgen insensitivity syndrome, which leads to insensitivity to testosterone. Women with AIS have lower rates of autism, are more anorexic, and have less athletic ability. But the ones who don't support gender differences mention that the brain enables plasticity, and some changes in the brain can happen based on the environment, perhaps the civilization in general. According to Sapolsky's review, maternal malnutrition hinders the fetal brain. Maternal stress results in more drug abuse, poor diet plan, high blood pressure, and poor immune defenses. And good rat mothering can even modify gene control in their offspring. A current research study by Joel Daphna of Tel Aviv University, published in Patterns in Cognitive Sciences and Philosophical Deals of the Royal Society, say the real question is precisely how different behaviors emerge. On average, women and men do differ with respect to some brain and behavior changes, but these differences are found in large numbers and can't be relied upon to forecast individual behavior or mindsets. So where does all of this leave us? I draw two conclusions. One is that there are differences between the genders, But one needs to look at conduct rather than thinking about gender. This dependence on studying conduct is the reason why the field of psychology has made development over the past 40 years. The research study of behavior is much more reliable and achievable than theorizing about what goes on inside an individual's brain. My second conclusion relates to conceit. We still have a lot to find out about the brain. I'm reminded of a 3-year-old at the beach filling her pail with water in an effort to reduce the size of the ocean, or to discover what's prowling at the bottom of the sea. We now have investigative submarines and underwater research equipment, but I actually believe we should beware about inferences about the brain and gender, though findings to date have been intriguing. Would I ever use perceptions about gender based upon research and experience in choice making? I would have to create a synthetic situation, like being assigned to pick 1,000 people for hand-to-hand army combat, and the choice would be 1,000 randomly selected males or 1,000 randomly selected women. Based upon what I think I know, I would be silly not to choose the males, while all of the women could be better than all of the males at carrying 50-pound backpacks up a steep mountain trail and participating in guerrilla warfare. I think this is uncertain, though there is no doubt that some number of females would do better than some of the males. When assessing people in real life on the individual basis for professions such as childcare or army battle, the best predictors of the future conduct are past behavior, motivation, and extensive evaluation, not gender. Classic experiments in the 1950s and 60s reveal to us how the brains of animals identify whether they would behave as males or female. It wasn't just their chromosomes, though, that are striking distinctions between males, who have one X and one Y chromosome, and women who have two X's and no Y. It turns out that the Y chromosome is essential for the development of testes, and it is the testosterone from the testes that acts on the brain. The early experiments revealed this by using species such as rats, in which this happens after birth. Remarkably, giving testosterone to little newborn women resulted in sexual conduct a lot more comparable to males when they grew up. The opposite was also true. Eliminating the testes of newborn males resulted in female-like patterns of conduct. Later, it was established that the same process took place in the brain during pregnancy in those species that are born more mature than rats, such as guinea pigs and monkeys. This opened up a remarkable debate. Did this actually apply to humans? And if so, how? We know that male human embryo form testes very early throughout the pregnancy, about 10 weeks, and that these new testes quickly begin to secrete testosterone. This means that the male brain is exposed to testosterone during a rather critical time during its development. What are the impacts? And are they lasting, as with other species? Human sexuality obviously is comprised of some parts, though. They overlap. Gender identity, the sex you identify with, is practically impossible to study in animals, though we know that males of many species treat other males in a different way than females, suggesting some sort of knowledge of gender as an equivalence to gender roles in human beings. Sexual orientation can be studied, as can patterns of sex. Both are changed by exposure or lack thereof to testosterone early in life, in the expected direction in animals. Testosterone, it appears, plays a major role in the development of sexuality. In the 1980s, when Germany was still split into a Western segment and an Eastern one, under the domination of the Soviet Union, a group of Eastern researchers proposed that human homosexuality was the result of insufficient exposure to testosterone in the womb. Since the moral environment of the time in that country regarded homosexuality with abhorrence, they proposed that all pregnant women should have the fluids surrounding their male fetuses tested for testosterone. Those with low values, they did not describe what these were, should be aborted, hence getting rid of gay men from East German society. An excellent example of abuse of science, though it was never adopted. But does testosterone play a role in the development of human sexuality? Testosterone acts upon the brain and other organs by activating a complex protein, the androgen receptor, If an anomaly in that later happens, the brain may not respond to testosterone. It's as if it didn't exist. There are such examples in human beings. XY embryos that are insensitive to their own testosterone. They are born mostly looking like women and grow up in that belief. For example, their sex identity is female. Typically, they're only found to be XY individuals at puberty, which does not happen. It's called androgen insensitivity syndrome, or AIS. They have normal-looking testes, though hidden inside their abdomen. There isn't truly a reverse circumstance. Early excess testosterone in XX embryos, though a condition called congenital adrenal hypertrophy, CAH, results in abnormally high quantities of testosterone in women, but this happens much later in pregnancy. Those individuals do have a higher than expected incidence of bisexual or homosexual behavior, but not very much. And some might also have doubts about their gender identity, but it's not nearly so striking as AIS. The distinction may be a result of timing. The results of testosterone end up being less as development progresses. We certainly can't rule out prenatal testosterone as a powerful, but not the only determinant of sexuality in humans. Again, when we speak about animals, what happens in the brain throughout early life to anticipate later sexuality? Current experimental proof points to real differences in male and female rodent brains. In the hypothalamus, a part of the brain well known to be carefully connected to sexual behavior, and a range of others, there are biochemical markers of being male. Those markers, for example, a boost in the amount of protein in the afferent neuron that binds calcium, are one outcome of differential activity of genes. Gene activity is controlled by many aspects. One is whether they are suppressed by a process called methylation. This includes the addition of methyl group CH3 to a special position in the gene. If this happens, then the gene is inactivated or suppressed. The amazing fact is that either environmental or internal events in the body can affect methylation on certain genes. This is the basis of modern subject of epigenetics. Epigenetic events can last a long time, maybe for a lifetime. They put aside the separation of genes and environment. The two become part of a common mechanism. The hypothalamus of female rodents has greater levels of methylation than males. That is, more genes are repressed. Offering such females testosterone postnatally lowers this. In other words, some of the methylation markers are removed, releasing those genes to become active. Some females act more like males. Therefore, giving a drug to the males that avoids demethylation leads to them behaving more like females. It seems that the brain might develop with some genes in the nervous cells of the hypothalamus suppressed. If this is left unchanged, then the person will develop as a woman. This concurs with the view that the default condition is female, though testosterone is able to get rid of picked methylation tags, thus releasing genes that identify male-like behavior. Now we need to know exactly what these genes do, and a lot more difficult, why they should define gender. But it's a start, and this development may be a door to a much greater comprehension on how sexuality develops and what influences it. Obviously, there is another major question. Does this actually apply to human beings? From what we know, we can prophesy that it likely does, but that sexuality in people, in all its forms, will also be significantly affected by social and experimental aspects to an extent, perhaps not so evident in other species, but which might also involve epigenetic events. Chapter 5. Sex Differences in Children's Play. There is a prevalent belief that children's play activities and toy choices, that is, dolls, toy weapons, are driven by parents or caretakers and other social influences, for example, media. Just as if kids do not have their own choices and can't identify for themselves what they find fascinating and what just doesn't catch their attention. The basic argument is highlighted by Dinella and Weisgram's 2018 summary of a series of articles on the relationship between parents, sex schemas, beliefs about girl-typical and boy-typical activities, and their children's toy preferences. We congregate innovative research on the factors that influence gender distinctions in kids' toy interests, how subtle gender-related messages impact children's performances and behaviors, and how grown-ups create these gender-related messages and influence kids' interests. Dinella and Wisegram, 2018, page 253. To be sure, there is a relationship between parental mindsets, stereotypes, and prejudices, and those of kids in keeping with social influence on children's beliefs and attitudes. The associated meta-analysis by Tenenbaum and Leeper, 2002, focused specifically on sex-related stereotypes and included results from 43 studies and more than 10,000 people. They found a modest relation between parents' stereotyped beliefs and their own children's stereotyped beliefs about women and men and boys and girls. The results were primarily for mindsets and did not reach sex-typed interests and habits. The latter included toy choices, and here parents' sex schemas had a negligible association with children's gender-related interests. Tenenbaum and Leeper, 2002, page 626. Simply put, parents or caretakers had an impact, though still modest, on what kids think about what's proper for girls and boys, and not as much of an influence on how they actually play or engage with their good friends. From a deeper evolutionary perspective, we see that play in one form or another is found in many mammalian species, and in some species of bird, fish, reptile, and invertebrate. Across species, play is voluntary, not instantly functional, involves some elements, though muted, overstated, or insufficient, of more functional activities, meaning prey capture, is repeated and pleasurable, and takes place only in safe environments. The extent to which play involves the practice and refinement of skills, and that includes the development of social relationships that will be used in the adult years or is a way to maintain them till adulthood, is debated. But it is nonetheless clear that play is an important part of common species-specific development. There are several different classifications of play, but we'll focus here on the rough-and-tumble play, or play fighting, and associated sex differences. Across species, play fighting includes lots of the same behavioral elements as intrasexual within the exact same sex, battling or territorial defense, but varies in enough ways to make a straightforward practice of fighting habits unlikely. Truth be told, a lot of the standard behavioral parts of species-specific fighting are clear at birth, but their expression is often better controlled, more nuanced, and more varied for individuals that have participated in play battling. By making it possible for the development of better regulated and more flexible combating abilities, this form of play very likely results in improved social proficiencies and later social competitive advantage, and developing supremacy relationships before play merges into potential harmful fighting. Sex distinctions in play battling are very common and track sex distinctions in form and intensity of competition for their mates in the adult years or competition for other resources, for example, food. Sex distinctions in play fighting have a tendency to be the largest in young males of polygynous species with intense, physical, male-male competition in their adult years, which includes people, see my earlier post, men's struggle for status and significance. Accordingly, play fighting normally takes place more regularly, with more vitality, and with greater enthusiasm among boys than among girls. The sex difference is found in all developed nations in which it has been systematically studied, but has not been as systematically studied in conventional cultures. In these cultures, the same sex difference is typical, but not always found. The absence of sex distinctions in some contexts is unexpected, because the expression is highly dependent on social context and is most obvious with groups of 3 or more same-sex kids and the absence of adult supervision. The highest rates of play combating occur in groups of not being watched children and in safe contexts, where boys take part in numerous forms of playful physical attacks and wrestling 3 to 6 times more frequently than do same-aged girls. In an analysis of activities of tirades of 4-year-olds, DiPetro, 1981, found that boys engaged in spirited hitting, pushing, and tripping 4.5 times more frequently than girls did. The sex distinction in play combating emerges by age 3 and peaks between the ages of 8 and 10 years old, at which times boys spend 10% of their leisure time in these activities. Similar to other mammals in which it happens, play fighting begins to merge into real battling during adolescence, and boys who become dominant during these encounters are more appealing to adolescent girls. As I defined in a prior post, men's struggle for status and relevance, male-male competition in many conventional contexts, and for much of human advancement, typically occurs between groups and also within them. The sex difference in the predisposition to self-organize into big and competing groups is illustrated by Lever's 1978 study of children's play and engagement in games. She asked 181 10 and 11-year-olds to make a record of their after-school activities throughout the course of 1 week, resulting in 895 cases of social play. Throughout this week, boys took part in group-level competitive activities like football and basketball 3 times as frequently as girls did. Observation of these children's spontaneous, for example, not organized by grown-ups, play activities validated the pattern noted in their diaries and indicated that boys' social play involves larger groups and greater role distinction within these groups. More frequently, boys contend as members of teams and must at the same time collaborate their actions with those of their teammates, while considering the action and methods of their opponents. Young boys interviewed expressed finding satisfaction in acting as an agent of collectivity. The approval or disapproval of somebody's teammates accentuates the value of adding to a group triumph. Basically, when left to their own devices, children participate in activities and organize themselves in ways that are consistent with aspects of evolutionary history. This does not, though, mean that parents or other grown-ups have no impact or there are no larger cultural influences. For example, the strength and nature, i.e. use of toy weapons of boys' play fighting, differs with the strength of physical male-to-male competition, particularly between group warfare in their social world. In societies defined by high levels of male-on-male physical aggressiveness among grown-ups, the play battling of boys is rougher than the play battling in more peaceful societies. In former societies, parents or caretakers and other grown-ups motivate engagement in play fighting and, in some cases, organize rough and physically demanding games to better prepare boys for the rigors of adulthood. In more tranquil societies, parents or caretakers tend to discourage and actively reduce rough conduct and activities that are typical for energetic children. This has been Brain Training, Myths, Cognitive Functions, and Sex Differences by Siri Gallows, narrated by Casey Logan. Brain Training, Understanding Emotional Intelligence, Attention Span, and More by Siri Gallows, narrated by Casey Logan. Chapter 1. What is emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence describes the ability to determine and manage a person's own emotions and feelings of others. Emotional intelligence is usually said to include, at the very least, 3 skills: psychological awareness, or the capability to determine and name one's own feelings, the capability to harness those emotions and apply them to tasks like thinking and problem-solving, and the capability to manage emotions that includes both managing an individual's own feelings when necessary and helping other people to do the exact same. There is absolutely no verified psychometric test or scale for emotional intelligence, as there is for G, the general intelligence factor, and many reasons that emotional intelligence is, because of that, not a real construct, but a way of defining social abilities that have other names. Regardless of this criticism, the concept of emotional intelligence at times is referred to as emotional quotient, or EQ, has gained large acceptance. Recently, some employers have even included emotional intelligence tests into their application and interview processes, on the idea that someone high in emotional intelligence would make a much better leader or coworker. While some research studies have found a link between emotional intelligence and job performance, a lot of others have revealed no connection, and the lack of a scientifically legitimate scale makes it difficult to really gauge or forecast someone's emotional intelligence on the job or at home. What does it mean to be emotionally smart? A mentally smart person is both highly mindful of his or her own emotions, even negativity, frustration, unhappiness, or identity, and manage them. Such people are specifically tuned in to feelings that others normally experience. It's easy to understand that a level of sensitivity to psychological signals, both from within oneself and from somebody's social environment, could make one a better friend, mother, or father, leader, or loving partner. Fortunately, these skills can be sharpened. This is something we have to pay attention to, in my eyes. Why emotional intelligence might help you do your job. The idea of emotional intelligence really shot to popularity and prominence in 1995 with the publication of Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. The subtitle was very important. It indicated that emotional intelligence could fill in conventional intelligence tests as an essential quality people need to accomplish success in life, especially in the work environment. Is it actually true that EQ can matter more than IQ for job efficiency? Scientists have long known that higher general mental ability connects to better job efficiency. General brain power is one of the best predictors of how people will perform their jobs. Evidence clearly shows that job performance relates more strongly to general mental ability than to practically any other quality people take to the job. It is more vital than personality types, years of job experience, or education certifications. In fact, the best estimate is that differences in IQ represent around 25% of the distinctions between people in job efficiency. This estimate originates from a meta-analysis, a systematic summary of an all-recognized proof on the topic, by American organizational psychology researchers Frank Schmidt and John Hunter. So, how does emotional intelligence compare? This is a more complicated question than it looks, simply because there are three different views on what emotional intelligence is. Some see emotional intelligence as an ability, the knowledge of how to view, comprehend, and manage feelings, emotional intelligence capabilities. Others see emotional intelligence as self-confidence in your emotional knowledge, the self-beliefs that you can perceive, comprehend, and manage feelings, psychological self-efficacy. Still others see emotional intelligence as a broad set of characteristics and inspirations that lead to mentally smart conduct, quality emotional intelligence. The three different types of emotional intelligence show different relationships with job performance. Differences in emotional intelligence capabilities account for only 3% of the differences in job performance, although differences in psychological self-efficacy represent 5% and distinctions in trait emotional intelligence account for 22%. Those estimates are also from a meta-analysis, a summary across all available studies, this time by American organizational psychology researchers Dana Joseph and Daniel Newman. So perhaps the subtitle was wrong. Perhaps EQ doesn't matter more than IQ. But we really need to consider what different jobs are a lot alike. Let's consider two different workers in two different jobs, June and Jack. June writes code for a living. She writes complex algorithms, repairs technical problems, and spends the majority of her time on a computer. When she interacts with other individuals, it is often due to a time-critical need to finish a job before the server security is breached. It is a complex job, and she's blunt and straight to the point in all her discussions. Jack operates in a call center, answering telephone calls from people who really need recommendation services after natural catastrophes. Jack has a list of phone numbers in front of him. While it is fairly easy to learn which services to refer the people to, the people Jack talks to are often distressed and confused, and at times angry about being kept on hold. He needs to stay calm himself and often tries to make people he speaks with feel better. A day at work for Jack includes a really different set of skills than a day at work for June. The first distinction is that June has a more complicated job than Jack. Her job includes a high level of information processing. Jobs that are scientific, highly technical, or professional have high job complexity. The job knowledge June needs to do her job is much greater than the job knowledge Jack needs to do his. The second difference is that Jack's job requires a lot more psychological labor than June's. When Jack is speaking with highly stressed out callers, he needs to be mindful about the emotions he reveals. Emotional labor at work is when a worker regulates their feelings and expressions as part of their job. Various jobs need different qualities to be successful. The link between general mental ability and job efficiency depends upon the complexity of the job. For the highest intricacy jobs like June's, distinctions in IQ scores can represent 34% of differences in job efficiency. For the most affordable, intricacy jobs like Jack's or perhaps simpler, differences in IQ scores can represent only 5% of the distinctions in job efficiency. That is, IQ is much more essential for high complexity jobs. The exact same reasoning certainly applies to emotional intelligence. Being well informed about emotions is only going to help you if your job requires that you labor with emotions. Emotional intelligence is more important for jobs that require emotional labor. Emotional intelligence capabilities represent 6% of differences in job efficiency for high emotional labor jobs, but 0% in low emotional labor jobs. Psychological self-efficacy represents 8% of differences in job efficiency for high psychological labor jobs, but 4% for low emotional labor jobs. Quality emotional intelligence represents 35% of distinctions in job performance for high psychological labor jobs, but only 18% for low psychological labor jobs. That is, emotional intelligence is far more important for high emotional labor jobs. For people who write code in the back room, maybe emotional intelligence is not so essential. But for jobs that focus on feelings of clients, consumers, associates, or other workers, emotional intelligence may be very crucial. Chapter 2. Ways to deepen your emotional intelligence. The best method for sharpening your emotional intelligence is apparent, and we will take a look at those now. Emotional intelligence has become a subject at the forefront of HR workshops, management groups, and corporate training sessions, and with good reason. Evidence shows that emotional intelligence plays a huge role in workplace performance. Individuals with high emotional intelligence perform better and generally experience better psychological and physical well-being. Emotional intelligence parts. The concept of emotional intelligence was made popular by an author called Daniel Goleman. His 1996 bestseller, Emotional Intelligence, introduced it to the general public. The idea was originally proposed by John Mayer and Peter Salovey in 1990. The model of emotional intelligence proposed by Salovey and Meyer includes 4 parts. Perceive emotions in oneself and others precisely. Intel. Use emotions to help with thinking, understand feelings, psychological language, and the signs conveyed by emotion. Manage emotions to get particular objectives. Studies have shown that emotional intelligence can be learned. It has become a billion-dollar market, as training programs have proved extremely reliable in helping people raise their emotional intelligence and perform at their best. But you do not need a formal training program to improve your own emotional intelligence. Here are 7 basic ways to increase your emotional intelligence. Number 1. Label your emotions. People hardly ever like to discuss their emotions, regardless of the fact that our emotions impact every decision we make. Lots of people are far more comfortable saying things like, "I had butterflies in my stomach," or "a lump in my throat," than what they are actually feeling, which is often unhappiness or anxiety. Practice labeling your feelings with real feeling words: disappointed, anxious, etc. Examine yourself a few times a day and pay attention to how you are feeling, even if you don't announce it out loud. Number 2, consider how your emotions impact your judgment. Now that you know how you are feeling, let's take some time to consider how these emotions are affecting your thoughts and habits. If you're sad, it may cause you to be afraid of rejection, and you may underestimate your chances of success. On the other hand, if you are overly delighted about a chance, you may overstate your chances. This could cause taking risks without analyzing the potential consequences or downsides. To make better decisions, you really need to recognize how your emotions are impacting your judgment. In doing so, you'll balance the look of your own logic and feeling, and therefore be better geared up to make decisions. Decide whether your feelings are a good friend or an opponent. Every emotion we experience has the power to be useful or unhelpful at times. The exact same emotion can influence us in either a favorable or negative way, depending on how we use it. Once you determine what you are feeling anytime, next consider whether that feeling is being a good friend to you or an enemy at the time. Anger could be a friend when it helps you defend oppression. It could be an enemy, though, when you are getting in a discussion with your boss. Unhappiness can be handy when it reminds you to honor an individual you no longer have, but it could be an opponent when it obstructs your motivation in life. If you understand that unhappiness is working as an enemy, you must do what you can to manage your feelings. Try out different coping methods to help you do this. Maybe meditation for some minutes can help you relax. Later, even a simple activity like walking around the block might bring comfort. Be responsible for your own feelings. Saying that your coworker makes you feel bad about yourself or blaming your boss for putting you in a bad state of mind indicates that you are letting other individuals manage your emotions. Your ability to react to your emotions involves your accepting full responsibility for them. Only you can choose how you choose to respond to your circumstances and to other individuals. Remember this at any time you are lured to think another person is dragging you down mentally. So rather than think, "He's making me mad," try something like, "I do not like what he's doing at this moment, and I am getting mad." Number 5, notice other individuals' emotions. Your grasp of how other people are feeling is just one of the key components to raising your emotional intelligence. Focusing on this will prevent you from disrupting someone you disagree with or delving into an argument. Pay attention to other individual emotional states. If you can recognize how someone is feeling, then you're going to better comprehend how that emotion is very likely to impact that person's perception and behavior. Number 6, limit your screen time. Spending too much time on your digital devices will impair your relationships. In romantic relationships, studies have found that having a smart device present while you're hanging out with somebody else can inhibit closeness and deteriorate trust. Way too much screen time can also disrupt a person's ability to read or understand emotions. And as you read earlier, this is just one of the 4 critical components of emotional intelligence. A 2014 study released in Computers and Human Behavior found that preteens who spent 5 days at an outdoor camp without access to their digital devices greatly improved their capability to read other individuals' feelings. This enhancement of comprehending nonverbal feelings took place in just 5 days without their electronics. Setting healthy limits on your technology would probably be a really good idea. Don't have your phone out when you are talking face to face with people. Set aside periods during the day when you will not use your phone, perhaps the first hour after you wake up, lunch break, or before bed. Doing a digital detox every once in a while can really do you some good. Several days without your electronic devices will better equip you in your capability to read other people's emotions. Number 7. Review your development. At the end of each day, review your progress. Did you engage well with a disappointed coworker? Acknowledge this of yourself. But then, also see the areas in which you really need to enhance. Did you get defensive about some rough feedback, or did anxiety prevent you from talking with your boss? Try to learn from your errors and do better in the future. There is always room to sharpen your abilities when it comes to emotional intelligence. Enrolling in a training program can help you if you're feeling stuck. And you can always read a book or work with a coach to help you increase your emotional intelligence a lot more. Chapter 3. Mental Tricks to Help You Stop Worrying. Worrying comes from a desire to be in control. We usually want to control our environment or the outcome of each circumstance. But the more you try to control every little thing around you, the more restless you'll feel. It's a vicious cycle to break. Concern, try to acquire control, struggle, stress, again, repeat. Worrying about things you can't control, like the state of the economy or another person's behavior, will drain you of the mental strength you really need to be your best. It can also lead to other toxic practices, like blaming yourself way too much or micromanaging other people. Luckily, you don't need to resign yourself to being a long-lasting worrywart. You can take control of your mind and train your brain to think differently. Here are 2 things you can do the next time you catch yourself stressing over things you cannot manage. Number 1. Develop a sensible sense of control. Determine what's within your control and what isn't. For example, you can control how attractive your marketing ads are, but you can't manage whether people buy your product. Furthermore, you can give your workers the tools they really need to be successful, but you cannot force them to be efficient. When you strike a healthy balance of control, you'll see that you can choose your own mindset and behavior, but you can't manage many external factors. So when you're confronted with a problem or experiencing discomfort, ask yourself, is this an issue I can solve? Or do I need to change how I feel about the problem? If it's within your control, tackle the problem. If it runs out of your control, concentrate on changing your emotion, using healthy coping skills like participating in a pastime or practicing meditation to handle the awkward emotions that get stirred up when things are out of your control. Number 2, arrange time to worry. Most of the people who come into my treatment office looking for a resolution on how to stop worrying want it quick and easy, but there is not a magic trick or unique tablet that will make you stop worrying right away. There is a mental trick, however, that can help you reduce your stressing. The techniques involves scheduling time to stress. It sounds outrageous on the surface, however, it truly works, and there are research studies to back it up. Set aside 15 minutes each day to stress. Mark it on your calendar or include it in your schedule. Make it consistent if you can. Think something like, I will stress from 7 to 7:15 p.m. every night. You might not want to stress right before bedtime, though. That may keep you up. Whenever you catch yourself stressing outside your amount of time, remind yourself it's not time to stress, and that you will have a lot of time to think of those concerns during your scheduled time. Once you arrive at your worry time, then worry all you want. Sit and think about all of the worries that are beyond your control. You can even write them down if you prefer. Then, after 15 minutes have passed, tell yourself, it's time to get back to your daily life. Get up and go about your usual business. With constant practice, research shows you will include your worries to just 15 minutes a day. That's a huge improvement if you're used to worrying 24/7. Build your psychological muscle. Becoming mentally more powerful requires you have a well-balanced sense of control. After all, you can do a lot to increase your joy and your chances of success, but you can't manage each aspect around you, like the weather, the economy, or how other people behave. When you stop stressing over things you can't manage, you will have more energy and time to commit to the important things you do have control over, and this can be crucial to reaching your biggest potential. Chapter 4. The Confusing Concept of IQ. Let's discuss IQ. Like it or not, the idea of IQ is still with us. How often do you read a book and the IQ of a character is described, or you turn on the news and learn that a defendant's low IQ is being used as mitigating circumstances for a criminal activity? Certainly, while they may be given different names like cognitive ability tests or aptitude tests, IQ tests are still often used in both school and work assessments. While many people know that having a higher IQ is more preferred, the principle of IQ has led to much confusion over just what intelligence is. For example, most people know that IQ means intelligence quotient. Why is it called a quotient? It is also claimed that a person's IQ is reasonably stable over the life expectancy. However, does this truly make a lot of sense? Is a child not smarter at 16 years of age compared with the age of 5? Intelligence does increase over childhood, though IQ hides this improvement. To comprehend this, we need to look at how IQ tests were created to gauge intelligence. Computing IQ. An individual's IQ rating was originally computed by dividing a person's psychological age by their chronological age and multiplying by 100, or MA divided by CA times 100. Chronological age was simply the child's biological age, or how old the child was. Mental age was obtained by means of an intelligence test and seeing how the child scored. This score was then compared to how other children did on the test. It was found that as children grow older, their score on the test would enhance. Mental age was then specified as the age at which a normal child exhibits a certain level of efficiency on the test, or how old it is that the typical child when they score that high on the test. So IQ is a procedure of inequality between a child's mental and sequential ages. Let's look at a number of examples to show this. Imagine if a 12-year-old performs like common 12-year-olds on the test. Their IQ will then be determined as 12 divided by 12 times 100 equals 100. An IQ of 100 represents the average IQ rating, just because the child's psychological and chronological age matches. But what if a child is gifted for their age? This means that they perform better than a common child of that age. They might perform like a common child who is 2 years older. Thus, the 12-year-old child will then have a psychological age of a 14-year-old. So their IQ will then be 14 divided by 12 times 100, which equals 116. So an IQ score greater than 100 indicates that a child is performing better than the typical child of that age on the test. We can then see that the intelligence quotient was called a quotient, as it is included by dividing sequential ages. This suggests that while IQ remains steady over youth, it doesn't always mean that actual intelligence stays the exact same over time. On the contrary, IQ is only able to stay steady over youth just because psychological age or the capability to resolve intelligence issues is progressively increasing. If psychological age stayed the same over childhood, then a kid's IQ would gradually reduce as they grew older. This boost in psychological age is shown in the design of IQ tests. The problems that are used to recognize gifted 5-year-olds are rather simple, such that any adult would find them simple to answer. Moreover, the issues that are used to identify gifted 16-year-olds are so challenging that many grown-ups would struggle to solve them. More recent IQ tests use a treatment where an individual's performance is straight compared to the efficiency of other individuals of the same age, typically referred to as normative sample. Nevertheless, regardless of this distinction in procedure, the underlying variations in intellectual efficiency are the exact same. Proceeding. The vital point to remember here is that IQ being stable doesn't indicate that psychological or intellectual efficiency is stable. IQ is only steady just because of how IQ represents distinctions in intelligence across people. It is not a direct procedure of how people perform on an intelligence test, but a contrast with other individuals of the same age. Valuing this particularly is very important when we start to look at what IQ tests might be assessing in the brain. Chapter 5. Why the least competent people typically think they're the very best. Recently, a good friend of mine told me about his roommate troubles. "He's a very good guy," my good friend told me, "but he sings all the time, and he's terrible." Even when the sturdy building of their shared apartment, his voice pierced the barriers separating rooms. If he were any good, it would be fine. However, he sounds like a dying whale. In the beginning, I just wondered if my good friend was being a bit too hard on the guy. Then a video appeared in my inbox. His roomie had tried out for American Idol, and my friend's characterization of his voice was regrettably spot on. Needless to say, he didn't make the first cut. What interested me, though, was what happened before and after the audition. "I am highly confident that I'm going to leave with the golden ticket today," says the prospective participant on a voiceover as the video begins. Then, despite the judges covering their faces and saying things like, "Singing isn't your thing," and "I've never heard a song like that," he goes on to actually believe that he is a skilled vocalist. When asked why the audition went south, his answer was simply, "I was a little anxious. I think that's what it was." This kind of audition isn't uncommon. A short internet search reveals hundreds of similar experiences. Additionally, outside the musical arena, the majority of us know, at the very least, one person who believes they are gifted at something that they actually are not excellent at. The supervisor who cannot manage, the instructor who can't teach, or the medical professional who sends out clients running for the door. This is called the Dunning-Kruger effect, after psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger. In a classic post appearing in the Journal of Social and Personality Psychology, they show empirically that the least qualified people often believe they are among the most qualified. Their clarification for this phenomenon is simple. Though it reads like a tongue-in-cheek tornado, unskilled people lack the ability necessary to assess their own ability. That is, the skills needed to be proficient at a particular task are practically similar to those required to examine a person's competence. Bad teachers usually can't tell they're poor at clarifying things, simply because they lack an understanding of how to explain things. Individuals who aren't amusing usually don't know they're not amusing, simply because they lack an understanding of what's actually funny. Judging a person's competence needs something that psychologists call metacognitive skill, or the ability to examine one's own idea. Practicing metacognition requires us to relinquish our normal egocentric perspective and examine ourselves from the outside. Instead of blithely believing we're smart, funny, or intriguing, we should step out of our skin and more objectively examine ourselves. Most of us lack the metacognitive skills needed to judge our performance properly. Try a little experiment the next time you're at a supper party. Ask people to raise their hands to show whether they actually believe they're above average, or below average on essentially any quality. Most people share to some degree similar intelligence or likableness. Defying the analytical odds, many people will say they are above average, at least in Western cultures. Even though scientists have observed such self-enhancement impacts across the globe, they might be somewhat less strong in Eastern cultures, which tend to position a greater concern on modesty. Though most of us aren't great at judging our own skills, those worst at a skill may be the poorest judges of all. In one study, Dunning and Kruger asked university students to self-rate how positively their rational thinking abilities were compared to their peers. They also asked the students to take a real test of such abilities. The results were stunning. The participants who were least proficient at sensible reasoning overestimated their capabilities to the greatest degree. Though they believed they rose to the 70th percentile, they were actually in the 12th percentile on average. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just an academic curiosity. It has real-world implications. In a research study appearing in the Diary of Medical Education, researchers asked healthy citizens to self-rate their competence regarding a range of common health treatments. More than 75% of the citizens believed they were so proficient at many of the treatments that they could teach them to others. Real specialists disagreed. After observing the citizens attempting to perform these procedures, expert judges typically showed that the 20% of them met this standard. So, the next time you think you're the best at something, stop and consider whether you might be an unwitting victim of the Dunning-Kruger effect. While your driving might indeed be worthy of an Indy 500 race car, it might also be downright bad. While your latest idea may ultimately lead to a Nobel Prize, it might also be ridiculous. And worst of all, you might not have the ability to discriminate, at the very least, not on your own. Fortunately, there is a remarkably basic antidote to the Dunning-Kruger effect: feedback. One of the best ways of knowing whether or not we are performing well is to look for feedback from trusted people who are widely acknowledged to be high performers. The key to this strategy, of course, is being open to actually hearing what is needed to be said, fighting our natural propensity to become defensive. Despite the fact that my good friend's roommate had an excellent opportunity to learn much from the judge's feedback, he discounted their observations, preferring to believe that he was just a little anxious. All of us have felt defensive at times, but well-meant criticism can help us realize our flaws and grow as people. With the right guidance, maybe more of us will live up to our own self-perception. Are you open-minded? There are many situational aspects that influences someone's dogmatism. The term unbiased has multiple meaning. Informally, it is typically used as a synonym for being socially liberal, as in, I'm an unbiased person, so of course I support gay marriage. It could also describe an individual's dogmatism, as in being open-minded, or not, to processing alternative viewpoints, to those held by an individual. In a 2015 paper released in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology, Victor Ottati, Erica D. Price, Chase Wilson, and Nathaniel Sumaktoyo examined a situational predictor of how individuals might fare along the later meaning of objectivity. Prior to defining one of the essential findings from the paper, it is rewarding to situate the work within the broader situational versus dispositional argument as relating to personality traits. When one generally considers dogmatism, obstinance, they are likely to presume that this is a dispositional quality, meaning an enduring and steady element of an individual's personality profile. The interesting twist is the Ottati et al. Paper is that they show that the extent to which one is narrow-minded is in part determined by whether they are endowed by the experimenters with a sense of competence. Take an individual and offer them with incorrect positive or negative feedback about their performance on some task. Consequently, administer to the same individuals a scale that captures how closed-minded they are in regards to their cognitive processing styles. For example, wanting to amuse political positions that are contrary to them. The people who are provided with positive feedback end up being more obstinate. Otari et al. Refer to this as earned dogmatism impact. To some readers, this might appear as counterintuitive, in that one might presume that an increased self-perception of competence should stimulate greater epistemic humility, i.e., a more open-minded orientation to all relevant information consisting of that which is contrary to one's position. Obviously not. On an associated note, one of the realities that I find most irksome in my public engagements is the limitless manifesting of the Dunning-Kruger influence. Incidentally, teacher David Dunning was my professor, though I was a doctoral student at Cornell University. The Dunning-Kruger effect is when a person is very positive about his or her ignorance, incompetence, and/or idiocy. For this reason, objectively speaking, such people are non-experts, and yet they carry themselves as though they are leading world authorities on an offered subject or a job. Chapter 6. Increase your attention span. Can focus and attention period be trained? Recent research reported in American Psychologist suggests you may be able to increase your focus, working memory, and even your intelligence through a completely free video game. Do try this at home. The game has also been suggested as a treatment for attention deficit disorder. What's the point of focusing? The ability to manage your focus of attention is very valuable in a variety of areas of life. At school, students need to focus to learn. Working memory, the capability to keep several relevant pieces of information in mind at the same time, is closely associated with the ability to control your attention and focus, and is essential to effective efficiency in many jobs. Computer programmers really need to hold some subordinates in mind to comprehend how the new software they are developing will mesh. Interviewers really need to hold together the different things that a job prospect says to identify themes and disparities. Researchers really need to keep the different components of a new theory in mind to see how they engage to make predictions. Research has carefully connected working memory to fluid intelligence, getting smarter and more focused. Current research has suggested that working memory can be trained using a unique video game. Aside from the direct effects on working memory, some current research has suggested that regular attentional training has other advantages. Decreasing symptoms of attention deficit disorder, ADD. One research study showed that children who routinely played an attentional training game for 20 days showed decreased symptoms of ADD, as ranked by their parents or caretakers. Increasing fluid intelligence. Some research studies have found that some regular attentional training can increase efficiency on Raven's progressive matrices and comparable tests of fluid intelligence, or GF. That is necessary simply because GF is a strong predictor of many life results consisting of job performance. Do try this at home. The best developed attentional training game is called Double N Back, and you can download and use the software application free. You can probably tell from the name alone that Dual N Back is not precisely the immediate addictive bejeweled blitz, but it has its charms in an unusually meditative way. The game requires you to at the same time remember letters spoken aloud by the computer and places of squares on a tic-tac-toe style grid, presented visually, certainly. At the simplest trouble level, you really need only remember the letters or locations from the previous round. At a harder difficulty level, you need to recall letters or areas from longer ago, the round before the last, and so on. Harder levels quickly end up being fiendishly tough and demanding, but you can always ease off and practice at the much easier levels. On the PC, you can play the Double and Back game by downloading the open-source software Brain Workshop. On the iPad, you can download the IQ Increase app, also free. Both of these variations of the game include full instructions. It ought to be noted that research in this area is at an early stage, and your results might differ. Anecdotal comments on different internet sites report a variety of advantages, from significant to none at all. Still, it never hurts to try. A typical theme is that it takes dedicated practice to achieve substantial results. Chapter 7. The 7 Reasons to Play Computer Games. Be honest, you want to be smarter. There's nothing wrong with that. Research consistently demonstrates that intelligence is amongst the most preferable qualities a person has. Whether it's attempting to endure an extensive college schedule, really appreciate the finer points of Machiavellianism, or impress good friends with an accomplished understanding of string theory, we all have our reasons. A lot of people agree with the idea that learning should be fun. It's a bit unexpected, but in some ways, video games can teach valuable lessons and might even help improve your mental faculties. Here's what you should consider. Number 1. Failure is essential to success. Ask practically anyone who has ever had any success in anything. If they have ever failed, you will inevitably get a resounding yes, because everyone has failed at something. The majority of people probably know about Thomas Edison and his spectacular failure rate, or his ruling out of countless possible options, if you're a half-glass full sort of individual. But there are some other examples. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers. Einstein didn't speak till he was 4, and didn't read until he was 7. Van Gogh only sold 1 painting in his lifetime. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Failure is essential. In many video games, you start with more than 1 life. Quickly, this tells you that failure is okay. A lot of the play consists of failing to reach an objective. That encourages determination and grit, the capability to stick with an issue and see it through without getting demoralized and quitting. That is a very important life ability. Number 2. Computer games may increase your problem-solving abilities. Consider some advice from James McGonigal, designer of alternative reality games, Ph.D. in performance research studies. She suggests that if you want to have fun and stimulate your mind, playing about 3 times a week for just 20 minutes each time should do it. Just about all of the most well-known video games have some requirement for problem-solving and/or critical thinking. That promotes adaptability and cognitive flexibility. These are truly crucial skills to have in any sort of problem-solving job. Number 3. Gaming keeps your mind active. It's regrettable, but inescapable. As we go through life, we catch both physical and mental decrease. Going to the health club or having regular sex will help to stop, or at the very least slow down, the physical losses. To ward off mental decay, one must maintain an active brain. Doing crosswords, Sudoku, playing brain games, or computer games, as long as they are not entirely mindless, might all help to curb the loss. While there's no definitive research study, including video games and aging, research suggests that senior citizens who stay mentally active are about 2.6 times not as likely to develop Alzheimer's or dementia. Additionally, certain studies have suggested that playing computer games can help improve memory and improve state of mind. Plainly, the message here is to give both of your grandparents and great-grandparents Xboxes this Christmas. Number 4. Gamers are better at visual tasks. Research studies have indicated that compared to non-gamers, experienced players are better at tracking items, keeping track of some items concurrently, filtering out irrelevant information, switching from job to job, identifying changes in visual designs, and 3D psychological rotation. A current study conducted by scientists at Brown University found that computer game practice was connected with improved visual learning. At the very least, one experiment has found evidence that playing computer games can improve the mental rotation capabilities of non-gamers. Number 5. Gaming might increase processing speed. Having the ability to process information rapidly is critical in many situations. Drivers, for example, exist with a lot of information, some of it continuously changing, and asked to make fast and precise choices that can have remarkable implications. In choice-making, though, speed is typically sacrificed for precision or vice versa. To put it just, quick decisions typically result in mistakes. Computer games usually require quick processing of sensory information and timely action. Indecision or delays in response are punished. Players are thus highly inspired to reduce their response time, RT. Several research studies have found that players have better RTs than non-gamers. That is hardly unexpected, but what may be is that this speed generalizes to numerous tasks, not just the specifics of the game, and that the increased speed does not result in a decrease in accuracy. So essentially, players process and react much faster, but they don't lose any precision when doing it. Some of these research studies have shown causality by demonstrating that RTs can be trained by gameplay. Players may have improved memory. A group of neurobiologists from the University of California has found proof that playing 3D computer games can enhance memory power. They got a group of people to play 2D games half an hour a day for 2 weeks, and another group to play 3D games 30 minutes a day for 2 weeks. Everybody was given a memory test before and after the 2 weeks. The group didn't really enhance at all, but the 3D group improved by 12%. Playing video games might improve your capability to multitask. There is considerable proof. That is Daphne Bevelier, a teacher of the brain and cognitive sciences, who has performed 20-plus research studies on playing action video games, puts it. Action video games are far from mindless. Her research studies suggest that players have enhanced skills in attention, cognition, vision, and multitasking. In non-gamers, reaction times increased by about 30% when they changed from a single task to more than one task. Players still had a boost, but it was only by about 10%. A research study appearing in Nature in 2013 found that just playing a fundamental 3D racing game for a total of 12 hours over a period of 4 weeks appeared to enhance multitasking efficiency for up to 6 months. Improvements were seen in 20 to 70-year-olds, but remarkably, the skilled 60-plus-year-olds outperformed 20-year-olds who had not played the game. Various other cognitive capabilities sustained attention, working memory, and so on, also improved amongst older subjects. Chapter 8. Dating for Smart People. When is intelligence attractive? There is more than one way to be attractive to a romantic partner. As a matter of fact, people tend to try to find different qualities in a mate. Beyond that, romantic partners typically find unique functions more attractive in time, too. Given all of that, how does intelligence fit in? Is mental capacity an advantage in the breeding market? Or does being too clever decrease a person's appeal? Research shares some answers. Research on Intelligence and Attraction to help answer these questions by Guinock, Derbyshire, and Oy, 2018, asked participants to examine potential mates at different IQ levels for both sexual partners and long-term relationships. The team also created a questionnaire to gauge the degree to which each individual found intelligence sexually appealing overall, called sapiosexuality. Finally, cognitive tests were used to gauge the IQ of each participant as well, to see whether there was a relationship between a person's own intelligence and their level of sapiosexuality as well. Results suggested that participants normally found potential mates more appealing as the intelligence of those mates increased, at the very least, till they got to the 90th percentile, IQ of about 120. After that point, however, very high IQs seem to end up being reasonably less preferable in a mate, for both a sexual partner and a long-lasting relationship. The authors suggested that this moderate drop in attractiveness may be as a result of a perspective trade-off, where very high IQ may lead to lower performance on other desirable characteristics like social skills and social functioning. After all, More severe success in one area may need less focus and development in another. However, additional results by Gignac, Derbyshire, and Oy in 2018 suggest that a subset of individuals do find really smart people especially appealing, particularly as sexual partners. Generally, 8.1% of individuals were evaluated as having a high degree of sapiosexuality. Such individuals tended to agree with declarations such as, "A really high level of intelligence alone is more than enough for me to be attracted to somebody sexually," and "Listening to a person speak extremely smartly arouses me sexually," and also, "A very high level of intelligence in a partner is necessary for me to be attracted to them sexually." Hence, while intelligence appears to lose some appeal at the extremely greatest levels for many people, a smaller-sized percentage of folks tend to find high IQ important and irresistible in a mate. Oddly enough, however, the sapiosexuality of individuals does not appear to correlate with their own intelligence. To put it simply, it is possible for a person to be attracted to high intelligence without being highly smart themselves, and vice versa. Acting on this last point, added research was conducted by Jonathan and Associates 2019. In this study, though, instead of taking a look at absolute intelligence, the team asked individuals to consider the relative intelligence of potential partners. Simply put, participants were advised to consider how appealing they found a person less intelligent, equally intelligent, and more intelligent than them as short-term or long-lasting partnerships. Additionally, examinations about the participants' own mate value and their choices for physical beauty in a partner were conducted also. Results gotten in this study suggested that people usually choose a partner, both short-term and long-term, who match their level of intelligence, more than one who is below their own intelligence. Beyond that, however, partners who are more smart are usually not more enticing than partners who are just equal to them. Thus, for most folks, the objective appears to be finding a partner of at least equal intelligence. This is specifically true for women, higher in mate value, as they appear to be the most likely to decline a partner who is less intelligent. Beyond that, Jonathan and Partners 2019 also found a relationship between individuals' considerations of physical appearance and intelligence in potential partners. Specifically, participants tended to concentrate on findings an even enough level of physical appearance in a partner, especially for short-term relationships, and after that consider levels of intelligence. In other words, some individuals appear to have a threshold that must be met for physical appearance first, normally on par with their own, before thinking about the merits of intelligence in a partner. Taken together, these results suggest the following. On the one hand, some people, 8% or so, tend to find high intelligence alone mostly and adequately attractive. Therefore, someone high in sapiosexuality might choose a real high IQ partner. The higher the better. This may be true even when the partner has lower physical attractiveness or social skills than another potential mate of typical intelligence. On the other hand, other individuals with lower sapiosexuality tend to focus more on meeting their basic requirements on other characteristics in a partner first. For instance, they may mostly try to match with partners who are at least equal with themselves on physical attractiveness and sociability before considering general intelligence. Such people don't penalize high IQ partners directly in their factors to consider. However, insofar as smarter people may be less likely to meet their requirements for physical beauty or social skills, they may be overlooked for lower IQ partners who do meet those other requirements. Tips for smarter dating. Given the above research, we can see that different people prioritize acquiring different characteristics in a partner, at least to a certain value, which often matches their own. More specifically, they set a specific requirement for a specific trait to be gratified with their choice. They also desire to compare on attributes with a partner to increase fairness in the relationship. Generally, this helps to create a mutually beneficial exchange. With that general picture in mind, there are some tips that clever individuals can use to enhance their dating success. Number 1. Concentrate on finding partners who value intelligence. Individuals high in sapiosexuality tend to prioritize finding a high IQ partner. If you happen to master that particular trait, they may just be eager to meet you. Hence, even when the general dating market appears bleak, there's a promising specific niche group to consider. The trick will be concentrating on partners from that group and finding them. Towards the end, many people find compatible partners through shared friends, education, or work. Aside from that, online dating can help find people with more specific preferences. Specifically, if they are a bit further away, activities that draw a big, smart, and nerdy crowd of blended genders can be an excellent way to meet individuals of higher in sapiosexuality, too, or comic, anime, game conventions, board gaming events, creative and cultural activities, book clubs, etc. Number 2, don't totally overlook your looks. While the idea may be to find a partner who likes and starves for you, your mind alone, the reality is the majority of people consider how potential mates look as well, at least a little bit. Thankfully, despite what well-known media tells you, you don't have to be a supermodel to be physically appealing to a partner. Nevertheless, there are a few standard requirements for personal health and style to be considered physically attractive. Therefore, even when mundane tasks appear less important than high IQ pursuits, don't absolutely neglect things like brushing your teeth, getting a haircut, shaving, wearing clean and neat clothes, etc. More particularly, simply because most folks tend to prefer partners who match them. Try to keep these physical characteristics at a level usually constant with partners who interest you. In that way, by at the first meeting those standard physical requirements for further consideration, as a partner you will give your exceptional intellectual attributes the chance to shine. If you really need an increase beyond that, having a pleasant character can make you look more appealing also. Focus on learning social skills too. Intellectual pursuits can typically be private and individual in nature, so folks who focus on such activities might not always develop the social skills needed to put their best self forward and get in touch with others. Fortunately, however, smart people can learn. Consider that to make dating more effective, it can help to concentrate on learning how to start a conversation, how to build rapport, and how to build attraction through conversation. Furthermore, learning how to flirt, read fundamental body language, and use nonverbal habits yourself can help too. Again, much like the physical requirements above, you do not need to end up being the world professional on these abilities to be appealing as a partner. But having the ability to start a discussion or detect several fundamental nonverbal cues can go a long way. Beyond that, my general guidance on this subject is to let your curiosity conquer any anxiety or negativity you may presently hold. Do what you do best and have fun learning. At the least, you are going to learn enough to find someone to love. At the most, you might fall for the topics themselves, too, and become a dating and relationship geek like me. This has been Brain Training, Understanding Emotional Intelligence, Attention Span, and More by Siri Gallows. Narrated by Casey Logan. The end.